The rain in Portland did not fall. It hovered. It was a grey, wet suspension that coated the world in a permanent sheen of melancholy. Elena stood by the window of the master bedroom, watching a single drop of water trace a jagged path down the glass. It moved slowly, hesitating, before merging with another drop and accelerating toward the sill. She felt a strange kinship with that drop of water. She felt suspended, waiting for gravity to take hold. Behind her, the sound of a zipper cutting through the silence made her flinch. Lucas was packing, or rather, Lucas was reorganizing the bag she had already packed for him. He was a man who needed to control the geometry of his life, down to the way his socks were rolled. Elena turned around. She was 42, though she often felt older in the mornings. Her hair, once a vibrant chestnut, was now pulled back in a practical, severe bun. She wore a beige cardigan that swallowed her frame. It was high-quality wool, expensive, but it looked like armour designed to make her invisible. Lucas did not look up. He was 45, and unlike Elena, he seemed to be aging in reverse. He was fitter now than he had been 10 years ago. His hair was silver at the temples, styled with precision. He wore a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms toned by expensive gym memberships and weekend tennis. He looked like success. He looked like a man who owned the room, even when he was just throwing a dop kit into a leather duffel bag. "Are you ready?" he asked. His voice was smooth, a baritone that commanded boardrooms. It was the voice that had charmed investors and silenced competitors. To Elena, it sounded like a recording. "I have been ready for an hour," Elena said softly. Lucas finally looked at her. His eyes were blue, piercing, but they skimmed over her surface without ever really landing. He checked his watch. It was a Rolex she had bought him for his 40th birthday. He rarely took it off, yet she doubted he remembered who gave it to him. "We need to make good time," he said, zipping the bag shut with a finality that echoed in the large room. "The coastal highway is going to be a mess with this weather. I don't want to be driving the cliffs in the dark." "Then we should leave," Elena said. She walked over to her own suitcase. It was smaller, older. It contained a sketchbook she hadn't opened in 6 months. She didn't know why she packed it. Hope, perhaps. Or habit. They walked down the grand staircase of their home. It was a beautiful house, a testament to Lucas's rising star in the tech world. Minimalist, cold, full of sharp angles and glass surfaces that required constant cleaning. Elena felt like a guest in her own life. She remembered the small apartment they had shared in their 20s, the one that smelled of turpentine and cheap pasta. They had been poor, but they had been solid. Now, they were rich, and she felt like she was standing on a floor made of thin ice. Lucas loaded the luggage into the trunk of the SUV. It was a massive black vehicle, insulated from the world, filled with screens and leather and climate control. A fortress on wheels. Elena climbed into the passenger seat. The leather was cold against her legs. As Lucas started the engine, his phone buzzed. It was mounted on the dashboard, a sleek black monolith. The screen lit up. A message. The name on the screen was simply S. Elena saw it. She saw Lucas's eyes dart to the screen, then quickly to her. He swiped the notification away with a practiced flick of his finger. "Work," he muttered. "They never stop, even on a weekend getaway." "You could turn it off," Elena suggested, looking out the window as the garage door rumbled open. "It is our anniversary trip, Lucas." "I can't just turn off the company, Elena," he said, his tone shifting to that familiar edge of condescension. "People rely on me. Things happen. You know that." "I know," she whispered. They pulled out of the driveway and into the grey morning. The windshield wipers began their rhythmic sweeping. Swish, thud. Swish, thud. It sounded like a heartbeat, steady and indifferent. The drive out of the city was quiet. Lucas put on a podcast about macroeconomics. The voices of men discussing interest rates filled the cabin, creating a wall of noise that made conversation impossible. Elena was grateful for it. She didn't know what to say to him anymore. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. One wrong word, one complaint, and he would sigh. That heavy, disappointed sigh that made her feel small and unreasonable. She watched the city fade into suburbs, and the suburbs fade into the towering pines of the Pacific Northwest. The rain intensified. It lashed against the windows, distorting the world outside into smears of green and grey. Elena closed her eyes and thought about the S on the phone screen, Sophie, as she didn't need a detective to tell her. She had met Sophie 3 months ago at a company gala. Sophie was 28. She was vivid. She wore red lipstick and laughed with her whole body. She was the director of communications, a title that meant she spent a lot of time communicating with Lucas. Elena wasn't stupid. She was just tired. She was tired of the suspicion, tired of the subtle scent of vanilla perfume on Lucas's shirts, tired of the late meetings. This trip was supposed to be a reset. Lucas had suggested it. He said they needed to reconnect. Elena wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the history they shared, 20 years of building a life, was stronger than the novelty of a 28-year-old admirer, but the phone had buzzed, and Lucas had swiped it away. 2 hours into the drive, Lucas signalled to exit. "I need coffee," he announced, "and gas." They pulled into a large rest stop nestled near the base of the coastal range. It was a sprawling complex with a gas station, a diner, and a coffee shop. The rain was coming down in sheets now. The parking lot was full of trucks and weary travellers. Lucas parked the SUV under the awning of the gas pumps. "I'll fill up," he said. "You go get the coffees. Black for me. Oat milk latte for you." He remembered her order. A small kindness. Elena felt a flicker of warmth. Maybe he was trying. "Okay," she said. She grabbed her purse and opened the door. The cold, damp air hit her face, waking her up. She ran through the rain toward the coffee shop entrance, her boots splashing in shallow puddles. Inside, the coffee shop was warm and smelled of roasted beans and wet coats. It was crowded. Elena stood in line, brushing water from her sleeves. She looked around the room, observing the people. A young family with a crying baby, a trucker reading a newspaper, a couple in the corner holding hands. And then she saw her. Sitting at a high table near the window, typing furiously on a laptop, was Sophie. Elena froze. The world seemed to tilt slightly to the left. It couldn't be. It was a coincidence. A cruel, impossible coincidence. But it was Sophie. She was wearing a stylish trench coat, her blonde hair perfectly tousled. She looked like a scene from a magazine, out of place among the damp, tired travellers. As if sensing the gaze, Sophie looked up. Her eyes met Elena's. There was a moment of shock on Sophie's face, a widening of the eyes, a slight parting of the lips. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a bright, practiced smile. Sophie closed her laptop and stood up. She walked over to Elena, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor. "Elena?" Sophie exclaimed, as if they were old friends meeting at a spa. "Oh my God, what are the odds?" Elena felt her throat tighten. "Hello, Sophie." "I'm heading to the coast for a shoot," Sophie said, the lie rolling off her tongue with terrifying ease. "Scouting locations for the new ad campaign. The weather is a nightmare, isn't it?" "Yes," Elena said, "a nightmare." "Is Lucas here?" Sophie asked, looking around, innocently. "He's getting gas," Elena said. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the hot coffee she hadn't ordered yet into Sophie's perfect face. But she did none of those things. She stood there, polite and paralysed. The door behind them opened. A gust of wind blew in, followed by Lucas. He shook his umbrella and stepped inside. He saw them immediately. Elena watched him closely. She watched for the panic. She watched for the guilt. But Lucas was a master. He paused, just for a fraction of a second, and then his face broke into a mask of surprised delight. "Sophie!" he boomed, walking over. "What on earth are you doing here?" "Just telling Elena," Sophie said, turning to him with a beam. "Location scouting, but my car is making the most terrifying noise. I think the transmission is shot. I was just calling a tow truck when I saw you guys." It was a script. Elena realised it with a sinking sensation in her gut. It was a poorly written script, and they were performing it right in front of her. The car trouble, the coincidence. It was all orchestrated. Or if not orchestrated, it was being improvised by two people who thought she was a fool. "Car trouble?" Lucas frowned, playing the concerned boss. "That's not good. Not in this weather. Where is your car?" "Out back." Sophie waved a hand vaguely. "I don't think it's safe to drive. I'm stranded, basically." "Well, you can't stay here," Lucas said. He looked at Elena. It was a dare. He was daring her to be the bad guy. He was daring her to leave a young woman stranded in a storm. "We can give you a lift. Where are you staying?" "The Salishan Lodge," Sophie said. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. The Salishan Lodge. That was where she and Lucas were staying. "What a coincidence," Lucas said, his voice flat, daring anyone to challenge him. "That's where we are headed. Grab your bag, Sophie. You're riding with us." "Oh, I couldn't impose," Sophie said, looking at Elena. "Elena, are you sure? I don't want to crash your anniversary." The word crash hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. Elena looked at her husband. She saw the hardness in his eyes. If she said no, she was the jealous, insecure wife. If she said yes, she was the doormat. "It is fine," Elena said. Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. "We cannot leave you here." "You are a lifesaver," Sophie gushed. She reached out and squeezed Elena's arm. Her hand was warm. Elena wanted to recoil. 5 minutes later, the dynamic of the trip had shifted irrevocably. The sanctuary of the car was breached. Sophie's luggage, a bright red hard-shell case, was in the trunk next to Elena's worn suitcase. "I'll sit in the back," Sophie offered. Nonsense, Lucas said. He was arranging things in the trunk. Elena, why don't you hop in the back? Sophie has longer legs, and you know how you get motion sickness on the winding roads. The front seat shakes more. It was a lie. A blatant physiological lie. The back seat was worse for motion sickness. Everyone knew that. But Lucas wasn't talking about comfort. He was establishing a hierarchy. Elena looked at him. For a moment, she considered refusing. She considered throwing her ring into the wet asphalt and walking away. But she had no car. She was in the middle of nowhere. And a lifetime of compliance held her feet to the ground. Fine, Elena said. She climbed into the back seat. It felt like a cage. The leather was dark and enclosing. Sophie sat in the front passenger seat, Elena's seat. She adjusted the recline. She adjusted the vents. She made the space her own. Lucas got in the driver's seat. He looked energized. The presence of Sophie had acted like a drug. His eyes were brighter. He checked the rearview mirror and met Elena's gaze. Comfortable back there, Elle? He asked. Yes, she said. He put the car in gear and they pulled back onto the highway. The rain had turned into a deluge. The wipers were working frantically now, slapping back and forth. The grey sky had darkened, bringing an early twilight to the afternoon. Inside the car, the air was thick with tension and perfume. Sophie's scent, something floral and musky, filled the enclosed space. It overpowered the smell of the leather. It overpowered the smell of Elena's own soap. So, Lucas, Sophie said, turning slightly in her seat to face him, ignoring the woman in the back. About the Q3 projections. I had some ideas on the drive up. Oh? Lucas smiled. Tell me. I'm all ears. And just like that, Elena was erased. They began to talk. They talked about work, about colleagues, about inside jokes that Elena didn't understand. They spoke a language of corporate intimacy. They finished each other's sentences. Elena sat in the back, staring out the window. The trees were blurring past, dark sentinels in the mist. She felt a physical pain in her chest, a heavy, dull ache. She wasn't just losing her husband. She was watching him become someone else. With her he was silent, critical, bored. With Sophie, he was charming, engaged, alive. Was it her fault? She wondered. Had she become boring? Had she stopped trying? She looked at her reflection in the dark window. A ghost stared back. Elena, you're being awfully quiet back there, Sophie called out, her voice loud and cheerful. It felt like a taunt. Are you okay? I'm just listening, Elena said. Lucas tells me you used to be an artist, Sophie said. That's so quaint. Do you still paint? Quaint. The word was a slap. Not much, Elena said. She gave it up to manage the house, Lucas interjected, his eyes on the road, but his tone dismissive. Elena is a fantastic homemaker. She keeps the chaos at bay. He made her sound like a glorified maid. That's sweet, Sophie said. She touched Lucas's arm lightly. You need someone like that. You're such a visionary. You need someone to handle the boring stuff. Elena griped the door handle. Her knuckles turned white. The boring stuff, her life, her sacrifice, all reduced to boring stuff so he could be a visionary. The road began to climb. They were entering the coastal range. The highway narrowed, twisting and turning along the edge of the mountains. To the right was the steep rise of the cliffs. To the left, a sheer drop down to the river valley below, and eventually, the ocean. The weather was deteriorating rapidly. The wind buffeted the heavy SUV, making it sway slightly. Fog began to roll in, thick patches of white that blinded them for seconds at a time. "It's getting pretty bad out there," Sophie said, her voice losing a bit of its playful edge. "I've got it under control," Lucas said, and he gripped the steering wheel. He loved this. He loved the illusion of control. "This car can handle anything. It's got all-wheel drive, stability control, the works." He sped up slightly, passing a slow-moving truck. "Lucas, slow down," Elena said from the back. Her voice was sharp. "I'm fine, Elena," he snapped. "Don't backseat drive. I know what I'm doing." "The visibility is 0, Elena insisted. "Please." "You're making me nervous," Lucas said. "Just relax. Read a magazine or something." Sophie laughed nervously. "He is a good driver, Elena. I've seen him navigate rush hour in downtown like a pro." "This is not rush hour," Elena said. "This is a mountain pass in a storm." But they weren't listening. Sophie turned up the radio. A pop song started playing, something upbeat and jarring against the grey world outside. She started humming along, tapping her fingers on the dashboard. Lucas smiled at her. He took one hand off the wheel to change the temperature setting for her. "Is that better?" he asked. "You looked a little cold." "Perfect," she cooed. Elena watched his hand. That hand that used to hold hers. Now it was adjusting climate control for his mistress, while his wife sat in the dark behind him. The anger began to rise in Elena. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of the movies. It was a cold, rising fear. It was the realization that she was entirely alone in this car. There were 3 bodies, but only 2 people who mattered to Lucas. She was luggage. She was an obligation he hadn't figured out how to discard yet. The road curved sharply to the left. The tyres hissed on the wet asphalt. "Look at that view," Sophie pointed. Through a break in the trees, a glimpse of the churning grey ocean was visible far below. "Beautiful," Lucas said, glancing over. "Lucas, keep your eyes on the road," Elena shouted. "God, Elena, stop yelling," Lucas shouted back, looking into the rearview mirror to glare at her. It happened in that second. That single second of distraction. That single second where his ego and his irritation mattered more than physics. The truck ahead of them slammed on its brakes. Red lights exploded in the mist like flares. Lucas looked back, but it was too late. He slammed on the brakes. The SUV's anti-lock system juddered violently. The heavy vehicle didn't stop. It slid. It hydroplaned on the sheet of water covering the road. Time seemed to expand. Elena saw the back of Sophie's head. She saw the coffee cup in the cup holder tremble. She saw the red taillights of the truck rushing toward them. Lucas yanked the wheel to the left to avoid the truck. It was the wrong choice. The SUV swerved wildly. It missed the truck by inches, but the momentum carried it across the centre line. There was no oncoming traffic, but there was no guardrail either. Just a muddy shoulder and then the drop. The car hit the gravel. The sound was deafening, rocks pinging against the undercarriage like bullets. The world began to spin. Elena didn't scream. She braced her hands against the seat in front of her. She thought, with a strange clarity, "So this is how it ends." The front of the SUV dipped. Gravity took over. They went over the edge. The sensation of falling was brief, followed by a violent, bone-shattering impact. The car rolled. Glass exploded inwards. The roof crumpled. Metal screamed as it tore against rock and tree. The world was a washing machine of darkness, noise, and pain. Elena felt her head strike the window, a sharp, hot agony in her side. Then, another impact, harder than the first. And then silence. The car had come to a rest. It was upside down or sideways. Elena couldn't tell. She was hanging by her seatbelt. The pressure on her chest was immense. The pop song was still playing, faintly, distorted and skipping. Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me. No more. Rain was coming in. The cold Oregon rain was dripping onto her face. "Lucas?" she whispered. Her voice was a broken croak. No answer. "Lucas?" A groan from the front. "Sophie?" Lucas's voice. Weak, terrified. "I'm here," Sophie whimpered. "My leg. Oh, God, my leg. Lucas, it hurts." "I've got you," Lucas said. "I'm here." Elena closed her eyes. Even in the wreckage, he answered Sophie first. She tried to move, but a wave of nausea swept over her. Something was wrong inside her. She could feel a warm wetness spreading across her abdomen that wasn't rain. She was bleeding. She hung there in the dark, listening to the rain and the weeping of the woman who had stolen her husband, waiting for the sirens that would force the ultimate choice. Gravity had become a confused concept. Elena hung in her seatbelt, the strap digging a trench into her collarbone. The blood rushing to her head made her vision throb in time with her heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. It was a slow, wet rhythm. Outside, the world was a wall of black mud and broken pine branches. The rain had not stopped. If anything, it had found a way inside. Cold water trickled through the shattered rear window, soaking Elena's hair, running into her ears. It tasted of earth and gasoline. The smell of gasoline was sharp. It cut through the metallic tang of blood. It was the smell of danger. "Sophie, Sophie, talk to me." Lucas's voice. It was ragged, pitched high with a panic Elena had never heard before. In the boardroom, Lucas was ice. Here, in the crushed metal carcass of his luxury SUV, he was a frightened boy. "My leg." Sophie's voice was a jagged tear in the darkness. "Oh God, Lucas, I can see the bone. I can see the bone." She began to scream. It wasn't a theatrical scream. It was the primal, animalistic sound of a creature caught in a trap. It was high and thin and relentless. "Don't look at it," Lucas yelled. "Sophie, look at me. Look at me." The front of the car shifted. The metal groaned. Elena felt the chassis lurch. They were not on solid ground. They were perched on something, a ledge, a tree trunk, a rock outcropping. Below them, the drop continued. Elena tried to take a breath. It was a mistake. Pain exploded in her chest. It wasn't just an ache. It was as if a spear had been driven through her ribs. She gasped, but the air wouldn't fill her lungs. Her chest wall felt collapsed. A broken rib, perhaps. Or something worse. She tasted copper. blood in her mouth. "Lucas," she whispered. The word was a bubble of blood that popped on her lips. He didn't hear her. He was scrambling in the front seat. The roof had crushed downwards, pinning them, but he had movement. He was unbuckling his seatbelt. "I'm coming, Sophie. I'm going to get you out." "It hurts! Make it stop!" Sophie sobbed. Elena turned her head slowly. The movement made the world spin. She looked towards the front. In the dim light of the dashboard, which was miraculously still flickering, she could see them. Lucas was twisted around, reaching for Sophie. His face was streaked with mud and blood from a cut on his forehead, but his eyes were focused entirely on the woman in the passenger seat. Sophie was a mess. The dashboard had crushed her legs. Her expensive trench coat was ruined, dark with blood. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and rolling in shock. "Lucas," Elena tried again, louder this time. She mustered every ounce of will she had left. "Lucas!" He froze. He looked back. For a second, their eyes met. In the upside-down world, he looked like a stranger. "You're okay," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a command. He needed her to be okay, so he didn't have to deal with her. "Elena, you're okay, right? You're just sitting there." "I can't breathe," she wheezed. "Just stay calm," Lucas snapped. He turned back to Sophie. "She's fine," he muttered to himself. "She's always fine. Sophie, listen to me. I need to find my phone. Where is the phone?" He was dismissing her. Even now. Elena closed her eyes. The pain was a heavy blanket. It would be so easy to just go to sleep, to let the darkness take her. The cold was seeping into her bones, numbing the agony. No. A spark ignited in her belly, a small, furious ember. She would not die here. She would not die watching her husband comfort his mistress. She reached for her own seatbelt release. Her fingers were numb. They felt like sausages, clumsy and unresponsive. She fumbled with the buckle. Click. The release was sudden. Gravity reclaimed her. She fell. It wasn't a far drop, only a foot or so to the crushed roof of the car, but the impact jarred her broken body. She cried out, a strangled sound that was lost under the noise of the rain. She lay crumpled on the ceiling of the car, gasping for shallow sips of air. The world was tilting. The car groaned again. "Stop moving!" Lucas yelled at her. "You're rocking the car. We're going to slide." "Help! Me!" Elena whispered. "I can't reach you," Lucas shouted. "I have to stop Sophie's bleeding. She's losing too much blood. Look at this. It's everywhere." Elena looked. She saw the blood pooling on the leather. It was bright red, oxygenated. Sophie's injury was gruesome, yes. But Elena knew, with a strange, detached medical certainty, that the quiet injuries were the deadliest. She was bleeding inside. She could feel the pressure building in her abdomen, a coldness spreading from her core. She dragged herself toward the broken window. Glass shards bit into her palms. She didn't care. She needed air. She needed to be seen. Through the shattered window, she saw the lights, blue and red, rotating, cutting through the fog like lightsabers. Sirens. The wail was distant at first, fighting the wind, but it grew louder. A beautiful, mechanical howl. "They're here!" Lucas cried. Relief washed over his voice, cracking it. Sophie, hold on. They're here. Sophie was barely conscious now. Her head lolled against the seat. Lucas, she slurred. I'm here, baby. I'm here. Baby. He had never called Elena that, not even when they were young. Elena was Elle, or honey, or dear. Baby was for something fragile, something that needed protecting. Voices outside, shouting, beams of flashlights dancing through the trees. Down here! Lucas screamed. He pounded on the horn, but it was dead. We're down here. A flashlight beam hit the car. It was blinding. I see them, a voice shouted from above. Vehicle is approximately 40 feet down. Unstable position. Get to the winch. More voices. The sound of boots slipping on mud. Ropes being deployed. Eleanor pressed her face against the cold mud outside the window. A face appeared. A firefighter in a yellow slicker. He was young, his face smeared with rain. Mum, he said, can you hear me? Yes, she whispered. Don't move, he said. The car is on a pivot. We have to secure it before we can get you out. My husband, she pointed vaguely behind her, and her. The firefighter shone his light into the front. He winced when he saw Sophie's leg. Okay, we have 3 souls, the firefighter radioed up. 2 conscious, 1 fading. Severe trauma in the front passenger seat. Rear passenger is alert, but pinned. Alert. That was the word that would doom her. It took 20 minutes to secure the car. 20 minutes of freezing rain. 20 minutes of listening to Lucas whisper promises to Sophie. I'm going to take you to Paris, Lucas whispered. When this is over, when your leg heals, we'll go to Paris. Just stay with me. Elena lay in the mud and broken glass, listening to her husband plan a future with another woman. She memorized every word. She filed them away in the library of her pain. Paris. He had promised Elena Paris for their 10th anniversary. They had gone to a tech conference in Seattle instead. Finally, the doors were pried open. The jaws of life groaned as they tore the metal apart. The sound was like a dinosaur screaming. First responders swarmed the vehicle. Assess triage, a commanding voice barked. A paramedic slid into the back with Elena. He was older, with grey stubble and kind eyes. His name tag read, Miller. Hi there, Miller said softly. He placed 2 fingers on her neck. Pulse is thready, fast. Skin is cold and clammy. He shone a light in her eyes. Pupils responsive. Ma'am, does your chest hurt? Yes, Elena gasped. Can't breathe. Miller listened to her chest with a stethoscope. His face tightened. He looked at her abdomen. It was distended, hard to the touch. Internal bleeding, Miller muttered to his partner. Possible pneumothorax, abdominal guarding. She's crash status. We need to move her now. Wait! The shout came from the front. Lucas had been pulled out of the driver's side. He was limping, holding his arm, but he was standing. He was frantic. Sophie! Lucas yelled. Get Sophie! Look at her leg. She's dying. Another paramedic was working on Sophie. Compound fracture, tibia and fibula. Arterial bleed controlled, but she's lost a lot of fluids. She's going into shock. Miller looked at Lucas. Sir, please step back. We are assessing. Assess. Lucas pointed at Sophie's mangled leg. Are you blind? Look at the blood. She needs the hospital now. Sir, Miller said, calmly but firmly, your wife in the back has signs of severe internal trauma. Her blood pressure is dropping rapidly. She is the priority. My wife is talking, Lucas screamed. The rain plastered his hair to his skull. He looked deranged. She's awake. Sophie is passing out. Look at her. Lucas grabbed Miller's arm. Miller shoved him back. Don't touch me, Miller warned. Please, Lucas's voice broke. He looked at Sophie, limp in the other medic's arms. Then he looked at Elena. Elena was being pulled out of the wreckage on a backboard. She was grey. Her lips were blue. She looked at Lucas. She didn't beg. She just looked. Lucas saw the quietness. He interpreted it as strength. He interpreted it as endurance. He interpreted it as safety. Elena is tough, Lucas said. He was trying to convince the medic, but he was really convincing himself. She's strong. She can wait. Sophie. She can't handle this. She's fragile. A radio crackled. Dispatch to Unit 4. Second ambulance is delayed. Mudslide on Highway 121. ETA is 40 minutes. Repeat. 40 minutes. Silence fell over the crash site. The rain drummed on the helmets of the firefighters. One ambulance. One spot. Miller looked at his partner. We can only take one critical. The other has to wait for the second rig. Take Sophie, Lucas said. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a desperate plea. Take her. If she dies, I can't live with that. Miller looked at Elena. Mum. Elena looked at her husband. She saw the terror in his eyes. Terror of losing his fantasy. Terror of guilt. She realised then that she was already dead to him. If she lived, she was an inconvenience. If she died, she was a tragedy he could exploit for sympathy. Lucas, she whispered. He didn't look at her. He was holding Sophie's hand as they loaded her onto the stretcher. Put her in, Lucas yelled at the medics. I'm paying for this. I'll sue this entire department if you let her die. Put her in the damn ambulance. Miller looked at Elena one last time. He saw the heartbreak that was far worse than the internal bleeding. He saw the resignation. Transport the leg injury, Miller said, his voice heavy with disapproval. Patient is unstable, but airway is clear. We go. They lifted Sophie. She moaned, a sound of pure agony. Lucas scrambled after them. I'm going with her, Lucas said. Sir, your wife, Miller started. She's fine. You said she's alert, Lucas shouted over his shoulder. He climbed into the back of the ambulance next to Sophie. He stroked Sophie's hair. I've got you. We're going. Elena lay on the backboard in the mud. A firefighter held a tarp over her to shield her from the rain. She watched the ambulance doors begin to close. Through the gap, she saw Lucas. He was looking down at Sophie, wiping blood from her face with his thumb. He looked like a hero. He looked like a man in love. Then, just before the doors latched, he looked up. He looked out into the rain. He saw Elena lying there. For 1 second, the adrenaline faded. The reality hit him. He saw his wife of 20 years, broken and abandoned in the mud. He saw the accusation in her eyes. He hesitated. His hand twitched. But then Sophie whimpered. Lucas looked away. The doors slammed shut. Thud. The sound was final. It was the sound of a casket closing, not on Elena, but on their marriage. The siren wailed, a rising scream that tore through the night. The ambulance tyres spun in the mud, then caught traction. It sped away, red lights fading into the fog. Elena was left in the silence. Well, not silence. The rain was still falling. The firefighters were talking in low, concerned voices. "Is the other rig really 40 minutes out?" one asked. "Yeah, it's a mess out there." "She's not going to make it 40 minutes," the firefighter holding the tarp whispered. He thought Elena couldn't hear him. Elena looked up at the yellow tarp. It was bright. It was the only colour in the world. She felt the cold moving deeper. It was wrapping around her heart. Her breathing was shallow, rapid sips of air that provided no relief. She thought about the drop of water on the window this morning, how it had hesitated. She was not hesitating any more. She closed her eyes. She drifted. Images flashed behind her eyelids. Not her life with Lucas. Not the wedding. Not the big house. She saw her studio, the one she had given up. She saw the smell of oil paint. She saw a canvas that was blank, waiting for her. She saw herself standing in front of it, alone, covered in paint, eating a sandwich with one hand and holding a brush with the other. She had been happy then. Why had she given that up? For the man who just left her in the mud. Anger is a powerful fuel. It is cleaner than gasoline. It burns hotter. Elena's heart rate slowed, not because she was dying, but because she was focusing. "Mum." The firefighter tapped her shoulder. "Stay with us. Talk to me. What's your name?" Elena opened her eyes. They were dark, reflecting the flashlight beam. They were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a witness. "Elena," she whispered. The voice was stronger than before. "Okay, Elena. Just hang on. Help is coming." "I know," she said. She wasn't waiting for help. She was waiting for revenge. But to get revenge, she had to survive. She focused on her breathing. In, out. Pain. In, out. Pain. She visualised the internal bleeding. She visualised her own veins. She imagined she was an illustrator, drawing the vessels closed. Stitch, stitch, stitch. It was a hallucination, of course. Hypoxia playing tricks on her brain. But it kept her awake. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The cold was unbearable. Her hands were blue. "We're losing her BP," a voice said. "Pulse is 40. "Where is that damn ambulance?" 5 minutes out. Eleanor felt herself slipping. The darkness was seductive. It was warm and soft. It promised no pain. It promised an end to the humiliation. "He left you," the darkness whispered. "He chose her. Why fight?" "Because," Elena thought back, "if I die, he wins. If I die, he gets to be the tragic widower. He gets the sympathy. He gets to cry at my funeral and then go home to her." No. She gritted her teeth. She bit her tongue until she tasted fresh blood. The sharp pain jolted her back to consciousness. "I will not be his tragedy." Lights appeared on the road above. Another siren. "They're here!" The second crew descended. They were faster, more aggressive, and they didn't treat her like a leftover. They treated her like a patient. "Let's move. Tube her. We need to decompress that chest." A needle was inserted into her chest. A hiss of escaping air. Relief. Sudden, glorious air, filling her lung. They lifted her. The movement was agony, but it was movement away from the wreck, away from the site of his betrayal. As they loaded her into the ambulance, Elena looked back one last time at the crushed SUV. It looked like a dead beetle. Inside the glove compartment of that car, she knew, was the anniversary card she had written for him. It said, "To the man who holds my heart." She hoped the rats would eat it. The doors of the second ambulance closed. The interior was bright, sterile, smelling of alcohol and latex. "You're going to be okay, Eleanor," the paramedic said. "We've got you." Elena stared at the ceiling of the ambulance. "I know," she thought. "I've got me too." The siren wailed. They began the drive to the hospital, the same hospital where Lucas and Sophie were. The race was not over. It had just begun. The hospital was a machine designed to process human misery. It hummed with electricity and fluorescent light. It smelled of floor wax and rubbing alcohol, a sharp chemical scent that burned the back of the throat. Lucas sat in the waiting room. He was a statue of despair. His expensive clothes were ruined, stained with mud and dried blood. He held a styrofoam cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He was performing. Even here, in the plastic chair under the harsh lights, Lucas was aware of how he looked. He sat with his elbows on his knees, head bowed, hands clasped. The picture of a devastated husband. Nurses walked by, glancing at him with pity. "Poor man," their eyes said. He was in the crash too. Inside his head, however, there was no grief. There was only a frantic, buzzing calculation, a flowchart of cause and effect. Sophie is in surgery, he thought. Her leg is bad. Screws and plates. She will limp. Will she limp forever? A limping mistress isn't part of the fantasy. He pushed that thought away. It was too cruel, even for him. He focused on the narrative he had constructed in the ambulance ride over. I had to make a choice. It was triage. Sophie was bleeding externally. It looked like arterial spray. Elena was quiet. She was stable. The paramedic said she was alert. I made the logical medical decision. He repeated this to himself. Logical medical decision. It sounded clean. It sounded like something a CEO would do. Efficient. Unsentimental. Necessary. But beneath the logic, a small, cold voice whispered the truth. You chose the one you wanted to keep. The automatic doors at the end of the hallway slid open with a pneumatic hiss. A gurney rushed in. It was surrounded by a swarm of people in blue scrubs. They were moving fast, running, shouting commands that overlapped into a chaotic noise. Trauma 1, coming through. BP is crashing 60/40. Start the massive transfusion protocol. Lucas looked up. Time seemed to slow down. He saw the glimpse of a face amidst the flurry of medical activity. It was pale, almost translucent. A tube was already down the throat, eyes taped shut. It was Elena. She wasn't stable. She wasn't alert. She was dying. The gurney flew past him. a blur of motion. A nurse ran behind it, squeezing a bag of blood that was flowing directly into Elena's arm. Lucas stood up. He felt a wave of nausea. "Elena!" he called out, but his voice was weak. A doctor stopped. He was tall, wearing a surgical cap. He looked at Lucas, then at the mud on his clothes. "Are you the husband?" the doctor asked. His voice was sharp, devoid of patience. "Yes," Lucas stammered. Is she okay?" "She has a ruptured spleen, a grade 4 liver laceration, and a hemothorax." The doctor listed the injuries like he was reading a grocery list of disasters. "She's bled out half her volume. We're taking her straight to the OR. Sign this." He shoved a clipboard into Lucas's chest. "What is it?" "Consent for emergency surgery. Exploratory laparotomy. Possible splenectomy. Just sign it if you want us to try to save her." "Try." Lucas stared at the paper. The words swam. If he signed it, they would try to save her. If he didn't... He grabbed the pen. His hand shook. He scribbled his signature. It looked like a seismograph of an earthquake. The doctor snatched the clipboard back. "Wait here. Don't leave." He turned and ran through the double doors, following the gurney. The doors swung shut, creating a final barrier between Lucas and the consequences of his actions. Lucas sat back down. The plastic chair creaked. He was alone. Sophie was in OR 3. Elena was in OR 1. He sat exactly in the middle. Inside operating room 1, the atmosphere was controlled chaos. Elena lay on the table. She was no longer a person. She was a landscape of trauma, and her abdomen was distended, purple and blue. "She's flatlining," the anesthesiologist shouted. The monitor let out a single, continuous tone, a high-pitched whine that signalled the end. Beep. "No pulse," the surgeon said calmly. "Start compressions. Push EP. Get me that clamp." The surgeon, Dr. Aris, took a scalpel. He didn't hesitate. He sliced down the midline of Elena's abdomen. There was no time for finesse. Blood welled up, dark and heavy. "Suction!" In the darkness of anesthesia, Elena was floating. She wasn't in the hospital. She was back on the cliff. The rain was falling upward. The gravity was reversed. She saw the ambulance driving away into the sky. She saw Lucas looking down at her from the stars. He left me. The thought wasn't sad. It was heavy. It was an anchor. Most people fighting for their lives think of love. They think of their children, their parents, the warmth of the sun. They hold on to the beautiful things. Elena didn't have children. Her parents were gone. Her husband was the one who put her here. She had nothing to hold on to, except the anger. The anger was a red cord. It was glowing in the dark. She reached out with her mind and grabbed it. It burned, but she held on. "I am not done," she thought. "I have not settled the score." "We have a rhythm," the anesthesiologist shouted in the real world. Beep, beep, beep. "She's back," Dr. Aris exhaled. "Okay, let's find that bleeder. She's a fighter, this one. She refused to quit." They clamped the artery. They removed the shattered spleen. They stitched the liver. They washed the blood from her abdominal cavity. It took 4 hours. 4 hours where Elena hovered between the world of the living and the world of the ghosts. But she didn't cross over. She stood at the gate and turned her back on the light. She chose the mud. She chose the fight. Meanwhile, in the recovery room down the hall, Sophie was waking up. The pain medication was heavy. The world was fuzzy and soft. She felt thirsty. Her leg felt like it was encased in concrete. "Lucas?" she croaked. Lucas was there. He was sitting by her bed, holding her hand. He had washed his face in the bathroom sink, but he still looked haunted. "I'm here, Soph," he said. "Did they fix it?" she asked, her eyes fluttering. "Yes, you have a cast, some pins, but the doctor said you'll walk again. It will just take time." "Where is Elena?" The question hung in the air. Lucas stiffened. He squeezed her hand a little too hard. "She's in surgery," Lucas said. She's hurt bad, Sophie." Sophie tried to focus. The drugs made it hard to think, but the memory of the crash was etched into her brain. The sound of the metal tearing. The rain. "You left her," Sophie whispered. Lucas recoiled as if she had slapped him. "I didn't leave her." "The ambulance. There was only one spot. You were screaming. You were in shock." "She was looking at us," Sophie said. Her eyes filled with tears. "I saw her face, Lucas, when the doors closed. She was looking right at me." "Stop it," Lucas hissed. He looked around to make sure no nurses were listening. "Don't say that. We did what we had to do. You were the priority." "Why?" Sophie asked. "Why was I the priority?" "Because I love you," Lucas said. It was the line he had used 1,000 times. In hotel rooms, in quiet restaurants, in text messages. "Because I love you." But here, under the fluorescent lights, with the smell of iodine and blood in the air, the words sounded tinny. They sounded like a transaction. "I saved you, so you owe me. I saved you, so you can't judge me." Sophie pulled her hand away. It was a small movement, barely an inch, but it was a chasm. "I'm tired," she said. "I want to sleep." "Okay," Lucas said. He stood up, relieved. "I'll go check on things. I'll be back." He walked out of the recovery room. He felt a strange sense of irritation. Sophie was supposed to be grateful. She was supposed to be looking at him like a hero. Instead, she looked at him with confusion and fear. He walked down the long corridor toward the ICU. The walk felt like a pilgrimage to a judgment he wasn't ready for. The ICU was quiet. It was a different kind of quiet than the waiting room. This was the silence of technology keeping death at bay. The rhythmic whoosh of ventilators. The steady beep of cardiac monitors. Elena was in room 4. Lucas stood at the door. He didn't want to go in. He wanted to turn around, walk out of the hospital, get in a taxi and disappear. Start a new life in Mexico. Change his name. But he was a man of image, and a man of image stands by his wife's deathbed. He pushed the door open. The room was dim. A single light above the bed illuminated Elena. She looked small. That was his first thought. She looked like a child lost in a pile of blankets. Tubes ran everywhere. A ventilator tube was taped to her mouth, breathing for her, and her chest rose and fell with a mechanical precision that was unnatural. Her face was bruised. A bandage covered her forehead. Her arms were covered in IV lines, delivering fluids, antibiotics, pain meds. Lucas walked to the side of the bed. He looked down at the woman he had married 20 years ago. He remembered their wedding day. She had worn a simple white dress. She had looked at him with such adoration. She had believed he was the sun and the moon. "I'm sorry," he whispered. He didn't know who he was saying it to. To her. To God. To himself. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he continued. I panicked. You know I panic. You know me better than anyone." He was rationalising. He was begging her unconscious form for forgiveness so he could sleep tonight. "You're strong, Elle," he said. "You've always been the strong one. I knew you could handle the weight. Sophie, she's weak. She would have died of shock. I saved her because I knew you could save yourself." He was rewriting history in real time. He was turning his cowardice into a compliment to her strength. "I abandoned you because I respect you." It was a twisted, narcissistic logic. He reached out and took her hand. It was cold. Limp. He squeezed it. "Just wake up," he said. "Wake up and we'll fix this. We'll figure it out. I'll make it up to you. I promise." Suddenly, the rhythm on the monitor changed. It sped up. Beep, 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 beep. Lucas froze. He looked at the machine, then back at Elena. Her eyelids fluttered. Lucas's heart hammered against his ribs. "No. Not yet. I'm not ready." But Elena was ready. Her eyes opened. They didn't drift open sleepily. They snapped open. The anesthesia was still wearing off, so her pupils were dilated, swallowing the irises. They were black pools. She stared up at the ceiling for a second, orienting herself. Then she turned her head. She saw him. Lucas forced a smile. It was a rictus of terror. "Elena? Oh, thank God! You're awake. You're okay." He leaned in, trying to play the role of the relieved husband. He brought her hand to his lips. "I was so worried," he lied. "I've been here the whole time." Elena didn't blink. She stared at him. Her gaze wasn't groggy. It was sharp. It was a laser beam cutting through the fog of morphine. She looked at his face. She looked at the fake tears in his eyes. She looked at his lips pressing against her hand. And then she moved. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled her hand away from his grip. It wasn't a spasm. It was a rejection. She placed her hand on the bedsheet, palm down. Lucas froze. "Elle?" Elena looked at him, and then she looked past him. She looked at the empty chair in the corner of the room. She tried to speak, but the ventilator tube gagged her. She frowned. Her eyebrows knitted together in frustration. She lifted her hand again and pointed. She pointed at the door. Lucas stared. You want me to leave?" Elena didn't nod. She just kept pointing. Her finger was steady. Her eyes were hard. There was no confusion in her expression. No, "Where am I?" No, "What happened?" She knew exactly where she was. She knew exactly what had happened. She remembered the rain. She remembered the ambulance. She remembered his face as the doors closed. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine that was colder than the Oregon rain. He realised, with a dawning horror, that she wasn't just alive. She was aware. "Elena." "I can explain," he started, his voice cracking. It was a chaotic situation. The medic said. Elena closed her eyes. She turned her head away from him, facing the wall. She was dismissing him. She was erasing him. The monitor beeped faster, indicating her agitation. A nurse bustled in. "Sir, you're upsetting her heart rate. She needs calm. You have to go." "But she's my wife," Lucas protested weakly. "She needs to rest," the nurse said, herding him toward the door. "Come back tomorrow, when the tube is out." Lucas looked back at the bed. Elena lay facing the wall, her back to him. She looked like a mountain range, cold and impenetrable. He was pushed out into the hallway. The door clicked shut. Lucas stood there, trembling. He realised then that the accident hadn't killed his wife. It had killed the woman who loved him. And in her place, something else had woken up. Something dangerous. Inside the room, Elena opened her eyes again. She stared at the blank white wall. She felt the pain in her abdomen. It was a fire. But she welcomed it. The pain proved she was alive. She thought about the S on the phone screen. She thought about Sophie's leg. She thought about Lucas's choice. He thought she was the safe option. He thought she was the furniture of his life. Sturdy, silent, immovable. He was right about one thing. She was sturdy, but furniture doesn't bite back. Elena moved her fingers under the sheet. She clenched her fist. It was weak, but it was a fist. She had been an artist, and she created worlds on canvas. She understood composition. She understood that sometimes, to create a masterpiece, you have to scrape the canvas clean and start over. Her marriage was the canvas, and she was going to burn it, but not yet. First, she had to heal. She had to learn to walk again. She had to learn to breathe without this machine. She would play the game. She would let him think she was confused. She would let him think she bought his lies. She would let him feel safe. And then, when he was comfortable, when he was sitting in his high tower thinking he had gotten away with it, she would kick the foundation out. A single tear leaked from the corner of her eye. It tracked across the bridge of her nose and fell onto the pillow. It was the last tear she would shed for Lucas. From tomorrow, every drop of sweat, every drop of blood, would be for herself. The monitor beeped a steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. It sounded like a countdown. The days in the ICU did not pass. They accumulated. They piled up like snow against a window, muffling the outside world until only the white, sterile interior remained. 3 days had passed since the crash. Elena lay in the bed, a prisoner of her own healing. The ventilator tube was gone, removed 12 hours ago. The sensation had been horrific, a gagging, burning extraction that felt like pulling a snake from her throat. Her throat was raw now, swollen and tasting of copper. She could speak, theoretically, but she hadn't. Not a word. The doctors called it post-traumatic mute response. They explained to Lucas, in hushed tones outside the door, that it was a common psychological defence. The brain, overloaded by the shock of the accident and the near-death experience, simply shut down the speech centre to preserve energy. Elena listened to them. She lay with her eyes closed, feigning sleep, and listened to them diagnose her silence as a weakness. It was not a weakness. It was a fortress. Inside the fortress, she was sharpening her knives. She opened her eyes. The room was bathed in the grey light of another rainy Oregon morning. The rain never stopped here. It was the perfect backdrop for a tragedy. Lucas was there. He was always there. He had set up a mobile command centre in the corner of her room, a laptop, 2 phones, a stack of legal pads. He was playing the role of the devoted husband with an intensity that would have won him an Oscar. He shaved in the hospital bathroom. He wore fresh clothes brought by his assistant. He greeted every nurse by name. He was campaigning. He was campaigning for his reputation. "Morning, Elle," Lucas said. He noticed her eyes were open. He abandoned his laptop and moved to the bedside chair. He looked tired, but it was a handsome tiredness, the kind of rugged exhaustion that made him look noble. "Dr. Aris says your vitals are looking great," Lucas said, his voice too bright, too loud for the small room. "Your liver is regenerating. The spleen, well, we don't need a spleen. You're doing amazing." Elena looked at him. She looked at the microscopic twitch in his left eye. He was terrified of her. "Do you want some ice chips?" he offered. "For your throat." He held out a plastic cup and a spoon. Elena stared at the spoon. She imagined knocking it out of his hand. She imagined screaming, "You left me to die in the mud so you could save your mistress." But she didn't. Because if she screamed, he would have a reaction. He would defend himself. He would cry. He would manipulate the narrative. He would make it about his guilt, his panic. Silence gave him nothing to work with. Silence was a mirror. When she was silent, he had to look at himself. She gave a microscopic nod. Lucas exhaled, relieved. "Okay. Here." He spooned a small chip of ice into her mouth. The cold was shocking against her inflamed tissues. It melted, trickling down her throat like a blessing. "Good?" he asked. She stared at him. She chewed the ice loudly. Crunch, crunch. "Sophie is out of the ICU," Lucas said. He dropped the name casually, as if testing the temperature of the water. "She's in the orthopedic wing. Floor 4. He waited for a reaction, a flinch, a frown. Elena remained impassive. Her face was a mask of porcelain. She's going to be in a wheelchair for a while," Lucas continued, filling the silence because he couldn't stand it. "It's a bad break, but she's alive. We're all alive. That's the miracle, right?" He laughed nervously. "A miracle." Elena swallowed the water. She thought about miracles. A miracle was God intervening. This wasn't a miracle. This was biology and luck. She had survived because her body refused to quit, not because the universe was kind. The door opened. A detective walked in. He was a heavy-set man in a cheap suit that smelled of rain and stale tobacco. He held a notebook. "Mr. Vance," the detective said. "Mrs. Vance, and I'm Detective Miller. I was at the scene the other night." Lucas stood up. His posture shifted instantly. He became the CEO again, shoulders back, chin up, protective. "Detective," Lucas said, "is this necessary? My wife is barely out of sedation. She can't speak." "I just need a statement for the report," Miller said, looking at Elena with shrewd, dark eyes. "It's a formality for the insurance and the county. Single vehicle accident, but significant property damage and injury." "I can give you the statement," Lucas said, stepping between the detective and the bed. "I was driving. I told you what happened. The truck cut us off. I swerved. The road was slick. I have your statement, Mr. Vance, Miller said calmly. I need hers. He walked around Lucas and stood by the bed. Mrs. Vance, can you hear me? Elena looked at the detective. She saw a man who had seen too many accidents. He looked tired of lies. She can't talk, Lucas interjected again. Her throat is raw from the intubation. She hasn't said a word in 3 days. Miller ignored him. Mrs. Vance, if you can hear me, blink once. Elena blinked. Once. Slow and deliberate. Good, Miller said. I'm going to ask you a few yes or no questions. Blink once for yes, twice for no. Can you do that? Elena blinked once. Lucas was gripping the back of the chair. His knuckles were white. This was the moment. If Elena signalled that he was reckless, that he was distracted, that he was speeding, he could be charged. Reckless endangerment. Negligence. Did a truck enter your lane? Miller asked. The room went still. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. Lucas held his breath. Elena looked at Lucas. She saw the sweat beading on his forehead. She saw the sheer, naked terror in his eyes. He was pleading with her silently. Save me. Save us. Save the money. If she told the truth now, he would go to jail, or he would be sued into oblivion. They would lose the house. They would lose the assets. And if he lost everything, what was left for her to take? Revenge is not about destroying someone immediately. It is about taking everything they value, piece by piece, until they are hollow. She looked back at the detective. She blinked once. Yes. Lucas let out a breath that sounded like a tyre deflating. Okay, Miller wrote it down. Did your husband appear to be speeding? Elena paused. She let the silence stretch. She watched Lucas squirm. Then she blinked twice. No. Was he distracted? Elena thought about Sophie's hand on his knee, the pop music, the laughing. She blinked twice. No. Okay. Miller closed his notebook. Sounds like a standard weather-related accident. Nasty stretch of road. You're lucky to be alive. Thank you, Detective, Lucas said. He was practically vibrating with relief. He walked the detective to the door, shaking his hand vigorously. Thank you for your professionalism. When the door closed, Lucas turned back to the bed. He looked at Elena with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Thank you, Elle, he whispered. Thank you. I owe you everything. Elena looked at him. Yes, she thought. You do. And I intend to collect. She closed her eyes and turned her head away. She was done with him for today. 2 floors up, in room 402, the atmosphere was different. Sophie's room was full of flowers. Huge, ostentatious bouquets of lilies and roses. They were from Lucas, of course. He couldn't visit her as often as he wanted, so he sent flowers. It was his way of buying silence. The room smelled like a funeral parlour. Sophie lay in bed, her right leg elevated in a traction sling. A metal fixator was bolted into her shin, holding the shattered bones together. It looked medieval. She was in pain. The morphine button was her best friend, but even the drugs couldn't drown out the image that played on a loop in her mind. The ambulance door closing. Elena's face in the mud. Sophie was 28. She was ambitious, yes. She had fallen for her boss, yes. She liked the expensive dinners and the thrill of the secret. But she wasn't evil. She had convinced herself that Lucas and Elena were essentially roommates. A loveless, dead marriage. Lucas had told her that. He said they slept in separate rooms. He said Elena was cold, asexual, obsessed with her routine. But the woman in the mud didn't look cold. She looked betrayed. The door opened. Sophie perked up, hoping for Lucas. It was a nurse with a lunch tray. "Time to eat, honey. You need the protein for that bone to knit." "I'm not hungry," Sophie said petulantly. "You have to eat." The nurse set the tray down. "By the way, there's a gentleman here to see you, not your husband. Says he's a colleague." "Lucas?" Sophie sat up, wincing. "Send him in." Lucas slipped into the room a moment later. He closed the door quickly behind him, checking the hallway like a spy. "Hey, baby," he said, and he walked over and kissed her forehead. He didn't kiss her lips. He smelled of hospital soap. "You haven't been here since yesterday," Sophie said. Her voice was whiny. She hated it, but she couldn't help it. Pain made her regress. I know, Lucas sighed. He sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle her leg. "It's complicated, Soph. Elena is... she's awake." Sophie froze. "She is? Did she say anything?" "She can't speak yet," Lucas said. "Throat trauma. But she's alert. The police were just there." "Oh, God." Sophie's eyes widened. "Did she tell them? About us? About the crash?" "No," Lucas said. "She covered for me. She said it was an accident. She cleared me." Sophie frowned. "Why would she do that? If she saw us, if she knows you chose me, why would she protect you?" "Because she doesn't know about us," Lucas said quickly. Too quickly. "She was in shock, Sophie. She probably doesn't remember the details of the ambulance. Trauma messes with memory. She thinks I just made a medical call." "You're lying," Sophie said. Lucas looked at her, stunned. "Excuse me?" "You're lying to yourself, Lucas," Sophie said. "She saw. I saw her see. And she's not stupid. You told me she was boring, not stupid." "She's loyal," Lucas insisted. "That's who Elena is. She stands by me. That's why. That's why this is so hard." "So what happens now?" Sophie asked. "We go back to Portland. You take her home. And I go where? To my apartment? Alone? With this leg?" "I'll hire a nurse for you," Lucas said. "The best home care. 24/7. "I don't want a nurse by a sort," Sophie shouted. "I want you. You said we were going to Paris. You said you were going to leave her." "Shh!" Lucas stood up, waving his hands frantically. "Keep your voice down. Do you want the whole hospital to know?" Sophie stared at him. She saw the panic in his eyes. It wasn't panic about her health. It was panic about his exposure. "You're not going to leave her, are you?" Sophie asked quietly. The realization hit her like a cold stone in the gut. Not now. Not after she almost died. You can't be the guy who leaves his invalid wife. Lucas ran a hand through his hair. He looked trapped. "Sophie, look at the situation," he pleaded. "She's broken. I can't just walk out on her the day she gets out of the hospital. I have to transition. I have to make sure she's okay first. Transition, Sophie repeated the corporate buzzword with disgust. You're managing us, you're managing your wife and your mistress like we're two failing departments. That's not fair. Get out, Sophie said. Soph, don't be like that. Get out, she screamed. She grabbed a plastic water pitcher from the tray and threw it. It missed him, hitting the wall with a dull thud, splashing water everywhere. Lucas backed away. Okay, you're emotional. It's the pain meds. I'll come back when you're calm. He slipped out the door. Sophie sat in the silence, listening to the water drip down the wall. She looked at her shattered leg. He chose me to save me, she thought, but he's choosing her to save himself. A week later, discharge day. The rain had finally stopped, replaced by a pale, watery sunshine that offered no warmth. Elena was sitting in a wheelchair by the window of her room. She was dressed in sweatpants and a loose sweater that Lucas had brought from home. She had lost weight. Her clothes hung on her frame. She still hadn't spoken. She had communicated with nurses using a whiteboard. Pain, water, bathroom. Thank you. The speech therapist had examined her. Physically, everything is healing, the therapist had said. The vocal cords are bruised, but functional. This is psychosomatic. Give her time. Lucas was packing up the room. He was cheerful, manic almost. The house is all set, he was saying. I had the cleaners come twice. I moved the guest room bed downstairs to the study so you don't have to climb stairs. I bought that organic juice you like. He was building a nest for a bird he had tried to kill. A nurse came in with a clipboard. Okay, Mr. Vance, the ambulance is downstairs to take her home. Non-emergency transport. Great, Lucas said. Ready to go home, Elle? Elena looked at him. She wrote on her whiteboard. Where is Sophie? She turned the board around so he could see it. Lucas froze. He stared at the black marker letters. She was discharged yesterday, Lucas stammered. Her parents came up from California to get her. They took her home. A lie. Sophie's parents were dead. Sophie had told Elena that at the gala. My parents died when I was in college. Elena stared at him. She didn't correct him. She just wanted to see how easily he lied. It flowed out of him like sweat. She erased the board. Okay, she wrote. They wheeled her down to the lobby. The automatic doors opened and the fresh air hit her. It smelled of wet asphalt and pine needles. It was the smell of the world. Lucas's car, a rental, another black SUV, was waiting. The valet helped Lucas lift Elena into the passenger seat. It was the same seating arrangement as the crash. Lucas driving, Elena in the passenger seat. Lucas got in. He started the engine. Here we go, he said. Back to normal. Elena looked out the window. She saw a reflection of herself in the side mirror, pale, gaunt, eyes, dark and hollow. Normal, she thought. There was nothing normal about the woman sitting in this car. The old Elena, the sweet illustrator who made soup and ironed shirts, had died in the ravine. The woman in the car was a ghost, and ghosts have only one purpose: to haunt. As they pulled onto the highway, heading back toward Portland, Lucas turned on the radio. He reached for his podcast. Elena reached out. Her hand moved faster than it had in weeks. She turned the radio off. The silence in the car was sudden and heavy. Lucas looked at her, surprised. Oh. Okay. Quiet is good. Quiet is healing. Elena pulled a small notebook from her pocket. She had asked the nurse for it. She opened it and wrote something, then held it up for him to see while he drove. I remember. Lucas glanced at the notebook. He swerved slightly. What? He laughed nervously. Remember what, honey? The accident? Of course, it was traumatic. Elena flipped the page. She wrote again. The choice. Lucas stared at the road. His face went grey. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. Elena, I don't know what you think you saw, he began, his voice taking on that familiar, condescending tone. You were hypoxic. You were in shock. The brain invents things. Elena flipped the page. One seat. Lucas fell silent. He didn't argue. He couldn't. The 3 words were too precise. One seat. It cut through his medical triage excuse. It cut through his I panicked excuse. It went straight to the heart of the betrayal. Elena lowered the notebook. She settled back into her seat. She didn't look at him. She looked at the road ahead. She didn't need to say anything else. She had planted the bomb. Now she would let the ticking drive him mad. The rest of the drive was silent. But it wasn't the peaceful silence of the hospital. It was a suffocating, heavy silence. The air in the car felt thick. Lucas kept checking the rearview mirror, checking her. He looked terrified. Good. They arrived at the house in the late afternoon. It was a modern mansion of glass and steel, perched on a hill overlooking the city. It used to be Elena's pride. Now it looked like a mausoleum. Lucas helped her inside. He was solicitous, overly gentle. He settled her into the converted study. I'll make dinner, he said. Soup? I make good soup. He didn't make good soup. He opened cans. Elena nodded. While he was in the kitchen, Elena sat in the study. She looked around. Her old life was everywhere. Photos of them on vacation. Her art supplies tucked away in a corner, gathering dust. Her phone was on the desk. It had been recovered from the wreck. The screen cracked but functional. She picked it up. She had hundreds of messages. Friends, family, neighbours. So worried. Praying for you. She ignored them. She opened the browser. She searched for Oregon state law. Spousal assets in divorce. She read for 10 minutes. Then she searched for forensic accountants Portland. Then she opened her email. She composed a new draft. She didn't address it to anyone yet. She simply typed a subject line. Timeline of events, October 15th. She began to type. Her thumb moved slowly over the cracked glass. 10 o'clock a.m. Departed home. 12:30 p.m. Met Sophie at rest stop. Staged meeting. 2:15 p.m. Crash. 2:30 p.m. Ambulance arrival. 1 seat available. 2:35 p.m. Lucas Vance denies transport to wife with internal bleeding in favour of mistress with leg fracture. She saved the draft. It was her insurance policy. Lucas walked in with a tray. Tomato bisque, he announced. He set the tray down. He looked at her phone in her hand. Who are you texting? He asked, trying to sound casual, but failing. Elena turned the screen off. She placed the phone face down. She picked up the spoon. She took a sip of the soup. It was lukewarm. She looked at him. She didn't smile. She didn't thank him. She just ate, mechanically, fueling the machine. I was thinking, Lucas said, sitting opposite her. Maybe we should go to counselling when you're better. Trauma counselling. For couples. He was desperate to control the narrative. If he could get her to a therapist, he could spin the story. He could talk about shared trauma. Elena stopped eating. She looked at him. She reached for her whiteboard. No. Elena, please, Lucas said. We can't just exist like this. With you staring at me. With these notes. We have 20 years together. Doesn't that mean anything? Elena wrote again. It meant everything to me. She showed him the board. Until you sold it for a seat. Lucas stood up. Stop saying that. It's not fair. I didn't sell anything. I saved a life. Whose? The word was a whisper. It was raspy, broken, like dry leaves scraping together. But it was audible. Lucas froze. He stared at her mouth. You spoke, he gasped. Elena looked at him. Her eyes were dry. Whose life did you save, Lucas? She whispered again. It hurt to speak, but the pain gave the words weight. Hers or yours? Lucas opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He collapsed back into the chair. He put his head in his hands. I don't know, he sobbed. I don't know any more. Elena watched him cry. She felt nothing. No pity, no love, no anger. Just a cold, clinical observation. He was breaking, and they hadn't even started the real torture yet. She went back to eating her soup. That night, Elena lay in the bed in the study. The rain had started again, tapping against the glass. She couldn't sleep. Her body was exhausted, but her mind was racing. She heard footsteps upstairs, pacing, back and forth. Lucas couldn't sleep either. He was likely texting Sophie, or drinking scotch, or Googling how to deal with PTSD wife. Elena reached under her pillow. She had hidden the notebook there. She opened it to a fresh page. She began to sketch. She hadn't drawn in years. Her hand was stiff, but the lines came. She didn't draw a bunny or a flower. She drew a car upside down. She drew a man standing in the rain. She drew a woman's face in the window, screaming silently. The drawing was dark, jagged, terrifying. It looked like a Goya etching. She looked at it. It was the best thing she had ever drawn. She realised then what she was going to do. She wasn't just going to ruin him financially. She was going to ruin his image. She was going to use the one talent he had mocked as quaint. She was going to paint the truth, and she was going to make the world look at it. The Vance household was a masterpiece of modern architecture. It was designed to let light in, with floor-to-ceiling windows that spanned the entire western wall. But in the Oregon winter, these windows did not let in light. They let in the gloom. They framed the grey sky and the weeping pine trees like a widescreen tragedy. Elena had been home for 2 weeks. She had established a routine. It was a routine of silence and occupation. She did not stay in the converted study as Lucas had hoped. She did not hide away. She took up space. She sat in the living room in the mornings, drinking tea and staring at the empty fireplace. She sat at the head of the dining table for lunch, eating slowly, the scraping of her fork against the china, the only sound in the house. Lucas was living in a state of high-functioning anxiety. He went to work early and came home late, but he always came home. He was terrified of what she might do if left unsupervised for too long. On a Tuesday morning, the rain paused. A rare, pale sun broke through the clouds. Elena was in the kitchen. She was standing. Standing was still painful. Her abdominal muscles were healing, knitting themselves back together like a torn sail, but she forced herself to stand. Lucas entered the kitchen. He was dressed for a board meeting, navy suit, silk tie, the armour of the successful man. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. "Good morning," he said. He poured himself coffee. His hand shook slightly. Elena didn't turn. She was looking at the knife block. "I was thinking," Lucas said, leaning against the counter, trying to project casual warmth. "Since you're feeling better, maybe we could have some people over this weekend. Just a small dinner. The Davises, maybe the Kims. It might be good to normalise things." Normalise. His favourite word. He wanted to erase the crash. He wanted to bury the memory of the ambulance under canapes and wine. Elena turned. She looked at him. She reached for the notepad on the counter. She wrote 2 words. No guests. "Elena, you can't isolate yourself forever," Lucas pleaded. "People are asking. They want to see you." "They want to see the cripple," she wrote. "They want to see if I know." Lucas read the note. He flinched. "Know what? There is nothing to know, Elle. It was an accident. Why are you punishing me?" Elena looked at him. She dropped the pen. It clattered on the marble counter. She walked past him. As she passed, she whispered one word. It was a raspy, damaged sound, but clear. "Liar." She walked out of the kitchen, leaving him standing there with his coffee and his lies. Later that day, Elena went to the garage. It was a cavernous space, housing Lucas's other toys. A vintage Porsche, a Ducati motorcycle, and in the corner, covered in dust sheets, were her old easels. She hadn't painted in 5 years. Lucas had subtly discouraged it. "It's so messy," he would say, "and the smell of turpentine gives me a headache." "Why don't you do digital art? It's cleaner." So she had stopped. She had made herself small and clean for him. She pulled the sheet off the largest easel. Dust motes danced in the dim light. She found a box of old paints. Some of the tubes were dried out, useless. But others, the oils, were still viable. She squeezed a tube of alizarin crimson. It came out thick and dark, like clotted blood. She didn't have a canvas. She looked around. She found a large piece of plywood leaning against the wall, leftover from a renovation. It was rough, unfinished. Perfect. She dragged the wood to the centre of the garage. She didn't bother with a smock. She was wearing a white silk blouse that Lucas had bought her. "Wear something nice," he always said. She picked up a palette knife. She began to paint. She didn't paint with technique. She painted with rage. She slashed the red paint onto the wood. She mixed it with black. She used her fingers. The paint got under her nails, into the cuticles. It stained the white silk cuffs of her blouse. She was painting the crash. Not the literal cars, but the feeling, the vertigo, the impact, the crushing weight of the metal, and in the centre, a void, a black, empty shape that sucked the light in. She worked for hours. She forgot the pain in her stomach. She forgot to eat. When Lucas came home at 6 o'clock p.m, the garage door was open. He drove in. His headlights swept across the space. They landed on her. She was standing in front of the plywood. Her hands were red. Her blouse was smeared with red. Her face had a streak of crimson across the cheekbone. For a second, in the harsh glare of the headlights, she looked like a murderer. Lucas slammed on the brakes. He sat in the car, heart hammering. He thought for a terrifying moment that she had hurt herself, that she had finally snapped. He got out of the car slowly. "Elena?" She turned. She held the palette knife like a weapon. "What are you doing?" he whispered. She stepped aside. She revealed the painting. It was hideous. It was beautiful. It was a scream captured in pigment. The red was violent. The black was abyssal. And in the corner of the chaotic abstraction, there was a shape that looked undeniably like the rear doors of an ambulance. Lucas stared at it. He felt sick. "It's intense," he managed to say. Elena looked at the painting, then at him. She wiped her red hands on her white blouse, ruining it completely. "It's the truth," she rasped. She walked past him, into the house, leaving the painting to stare at him in the garage. Meanwhile, across the city, inside a luxury apartment that felt more like a prison cell, Sophie was unravelling. Her leg was encased in a heavy cast. She was propped up on a sofa, surrounded by takeout containers and pill bottles. The silence in her apartment was different from the silence in the Vance house. Elena's silence was a weapon. Sophie's silence was a void. She checked her phone. No messages. She had texted Lucas 5 times today. "How is she? When can I see you? My leg hurts. I'm lonely. Do you even care?" He had replied once, hours ago. "Can't talk. Crazy day. Stay strong. Stay strong." It was a dismissal. It was what you said to a subordinate, not a lover. Sophie threw the phone across the room. It landed on the rug, unharmed. She grabbed her crutches. The movement sent a jolt of pain up her shin. She gritted her teeth. She hobbled to the window. It looked out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, Lucas was with his wife. He was probably having dinner. He was probably pouring wine. Was he sleeping with her? The thought made Sophie nauseous. She remembered the crash. She remembered the way Lucas had looked at her when she screamed. He had been desperate. He had loved her then. She was sure of it. So why is he hiding now? She knew the answer. Because she was broken. And Lucas Vance didn't like broken things. He liked shiny, perfect things. He liked trophies. Sophie looked at her reflection in the window. Her hair was greasy. She hadn't worn makeup in a week. She looked old. "I'm not going to disappear," she whispered to the glass. She hobbled over to the phone. She picked it up. She didn't call Lucas's cell. He wouldn't answer. She dialed a number she knew by heart, though she had never used it. It was the number for the Vance home landline. She waited. Ring, ring, ring. In the Vance kitchen, Elena was washing the paint off her hands. The water in the sink turned pink. The landline on the wall rang. Elena froze. Nobody called the landline anymore. Only telemarketers and emergencies. She dried her hands. She walked over to the phone. She picked it up. She didn't say hello. She just held the receiver to her ear and breathed. "Lucas?" The voice on the other end was small, hesitant, female. Eleanor recognised it, instantly, and it was the voice that had laughed in the car. It was the voice that had screamed about a leg while Elena bled internally. Sophie. Elena didn't speak. She stood perfectly still. "Lucas, are you there?" Sophie asked. "Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you. I'm going crazy here." Elena listened. She felt a strange, cold power flowing through the wire. "You haven't answered my texts," Sophie continued, her voice trembling. "I know it's hard with her there. I know you have to play the part. But I'm hurting, Lucas. You chose me, remember? You chose me. You chose me." Elena closed her eyes. The confirmation. Spoken aloud. Recorded in her memory. "I love you," Sophie sobbed. "Just tell me you haven't forgotten." Elena took a breath. She parted her lips. "He is in the shower," Elena whispered. Her voice was low, raspy, barely human. On the other end of the line, there was a gasp, a sharp intake of breath. "Elena!" Sophie's voice was a squeak of terror. "He is washing off the paint," Elena said. "He is washing off the day. He is washing off you." I didn't," Sophie stammered. "Do not call this house again," Elena said. She spoke slowly, enunciating every consonant. "If you call again, I will not be the one who answers. The police will answer." "Elena, please, Elena hung up. She stood there, her hand on the receiver. Her heart was beating calmly. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't crying. She felt cleansed. She walked back to the sink and finished washing her hands. The water ran clear. The next morning, Lucas found the bank statements on his desk. He had a home office, a sanctuary of mahogany and leather. He usually kept it locked, but he must have forgotten last night in his distraction over the painting. The statements were laid out on the blotter. They were highlighted. Yellow highlighter. Bright neon. Accusing lines. Lucas sat down. He felt the blood drain from his face. The highlighted lines were not grocery bills. They were transfers. October 2nd, 5,000. Transfer to SM. Holdings, September 15th, 12,000. Cartier. August 30th, 3,500. The Ritz-Carlton. July 10, 50,000. Consulting fee. S. Miller. Sophie Miller. He had been siphoning money from their joint investment account. He had told himself it was just a loan, that he would pay it back after his bonus. He had bought Sophie jewellery. He had paid off her student loans disguised as consulting fees. Elena knew. She hadn't just found the affair. She had found the theft. This wasn't just adultery anymore. This was fraud. Lucas stood up. He felt like the walls were closing in. He needed to talk to her. He needed to spin this. He ran downstairs. Elena was in the living room. She had brought the painting in from the garage. It was leaning against the fireplace, a jagged wound in the perfect room. She was sitting on the sofa, reading a book. Elena, Lucas said. He was breathless. We need to talk. She didn't look up. About the consulting fees? She asked. Her voice was getting stronger. It was cold steel now. I can explain, Lucas said. It was business. Sophie did do work for the firm. It was legitimate. Cartier is not a business expense, Lucas, Elena said. She turned a page. It was a mistake, Lucas said. He dropped to his knees in front of her. I was stupid. I was weak. But it's money, Elena. We have money. I can replace it. You think this is about the money? Elena looked at him. Her eyes were ancient. You used our retirement fund, she said. The money we saved for the house in Italy. You used it to buy her a bracelet. I'll buy you a bracelet, Lucas babbled. I'll buy you 10 bracelets. I'll buy you the house in Italy right now. Just stop looking at me like that. Like what? Like you hate me. Elena smiled. It was a terrifying expression. It didn't reach her eyes. I don't hate you, Lucas, she said. Hate implies passion. I don't have passion for you. I have arithmetic. Arithmetic? I am calculating, she said. I'm calculating the cost of a seat in an ambulance. I am calculating the cost of 20 years of laundry and cooking and supporting you while you built your empire. And now I'm calculating the interest. Lucas stood up. He backed away. What are you going to do? I'm going to paint, she said. And you are going to pose. Pose? Sit, she commanded. She pointed to the armchair opposite the painting. I have to go to work, Lucas said. Sit down, Lucas. The authority in her voice was absolute. It was the voice of a mother speaking to a petulant child. It was the voice of a judge. Lucas sat. Elena picked up a sketch pad. She picked up charcoal. Don't move, she said. I want to capture the fear. It's the most honest expression you've had in years. She began to draw. Scritch. Scratch. Scritch. The sound was like a rodent gnawing on bone. Lucas sat there, trapped in his own living room, watched by his wife and the horrific painting of his crime. He wanted to run, but he couldn't. He was paralysed by guilt and the terrifying realisation that he didn't know who this woman was. 3 days passed. The house became a pressure cooker. Lucas stopped going to work. He called in sick. He told his board he was dealing with family trauma. It was the truth, in a way. He spent his days drinking scotch and watching Elena paint. She had taken over the living room completely. She had brought in more plywood, more canvases. The smell of turpentine permeated the house, masking the expensive scented candles. She was painting a series. The first one was the crash. The second one was the hospital bed. The third one was Sophie. Lucas saw it on Thursday evening. He walked into the living room and stopped dead. It was a portrait of Sophie. But it wasn't the beautiful, vibrant Sophie he knew. It was Sophie as she looked in the wreck, distorted, screaming, her leg mangled. But the face was melting. It was a caricature of vanity dissolving into pain. Why are you doing this? Lucas whispered. He was holding a glass of scotch. It was his 4th of the afternoon. Elena was standing at the easel. She was wearing a pair of Lucas's old coveralls. She looked small but formidable. "I am processing my trauma," she said. "Isn't that what the therapist suggested?" "This isn't therapy," Lucas spat. "This is torture. You're torturing me." "Is it working?" she asked without turning around. "Stop it!" Lucas threw his glass. It shattered against the fireplace, inches from the painting of the crash. Amber liquid splashed onto the ambulance doors. "You're crazy," Lucas shouted. "You've lost your mind. I made a mistake, okay? I made a terrible, selfish mistake. But I am still your husband. I am still the man who built this life for you." Elena put down her brush. She turned slowly. "You didn't build this life for me," she said. "You built it for yourself. I was just the ornament, and when the ornament broke, you tried to throw it away." "I didn't throw you away," Lucas screamed. "I panicked." "You chose," she said, "and now I am choosing." "Choosing what?" "To show the world what you really are." She walked over to a covered canvas in the corner. "I have an exhibition," she said. Lucas froze. "What?" "I called the gallery downtown. The one you said was too avant-garde for our taste. The owner came by yesterday while you were passed out on the sofa." People came here?" Lucas looked around wildly. The house was a mess of art supplies and takeout boxes. "She loved the work," Elena said. "She called it visceral and unflinching. She wants to do a show next month. It's titled The Empty Seat." Lucas felt the room spin. An exhibition. People would see these paintings. His colleagues. His investors. The press. They would see the ambulance. They would see the mistress. They would see the monster in the suit. "You can't," Lucas whispered. "It will ruin me." "Yes," Elena said. "It probably will." "Why?" Lucas fell to his knees again. He was crying now. Ugly, drunken sobs. "Why destroy everything? We can fix this. I can make you happy." Elena walked over to him. She looked down at him. "I don't want to be happy, Lucas," she said softly. "I want to be whole. And to be whole, I have to cut out the rot." She reached out and touched his hair. It was a tender gesture, but her hand was cold. "You are the rot." The next morning, the situation escalated. Lucas woke up on the sofa. He had a splitting headache. The house was quiet. He sat up. "Elena?" No answer. He walked into the kitchen. Empty. He checked the bedroom. Empty. He checked the garage. The Porsche was gone. Panic flared. She couldn't drive. She was still on painkillers. Her reaction time was slow. He ran back inside and grabbed his phone. He tracked the Porsche's GPS. It was moving. It was heading downtown. It was heading towards Sophie's apartment building. Lucas stared at the dot on the screen. No, she wouldn't. But Elena had proven she would do anything. Lucas ran to the SUV, the rental. He started it and peeled out of the driveway. He had to get there first. He had to stop them. If Eleanor and Sophie were in the same room, if Eleanor told Sophie the truth about the money, about the lies, about everything, the triangle would collapse, and he would be crushed in the centre. He drove like a madman. He ran red lights. He didn't care. He called Sophie. No answer. He called Elena. No answer. He was losing control. For 20 years, he had controlled everything. The stock price, the board, the wife, the mistress. He was the conductor. Now the orchestra was burning the concert hall down. He arrived at Sophie's building. He abandoned the car in the loading zone. He sprinted into the lobby. "Sophie Miller!" he yelled at the concierge. "Let me up!" "Sir, you need to be announced." Lucas jumped the turnstile. Security shouted. He didn't care. He hit the elevator button. He rode the elevator up to the 12th floor. The numbers ticked by agonizingly slowly. Ding. The doors opened. He ran down the hall to apartment 1204. The door was ajar. Lucas stopped. His breath hitched. He pushed the door open. "Sophie?" The apartment was quiet. He walked in. In the living room, Sophie was sitting on her sofa. She was pale, clutching a pillow. Her cast was propped up on the coffee table. Sitting opposite her, in a velvet armchair, was Elena. Elena was wearing a trench coat. She looked elegant. She looked composed. On the table between them lay a file folder. It was open. Sophie was crying silently. Tears streamed down her face. She was looking at the papers in the folder. Lucas stood in the doorway. "Elena." Elena looked up. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just looked at him with that terrifying, neutral gaze. "Hello, Lucas," she said. "We were just looking at the financials." Sophie looked up at Lucas. Her eyes were not full of love anymore. They were full of horror. "You charged my abortion to the company account," Sophie whispered. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Lucas felt his knees give way. "Sophie, You labelled it office supplies," Sophie choked out. She held up the statement. "Office supplies. That's what our baby was to you? Staples?" Lucas looked at Elena. "You showed her." "She had a right to know," Elena said calmly. "She thought you loved her. She needed to know. She was just inventory." Elena stood up. She buttoned her coat. "I think my work here is done," Elena said. She walked toward the door. Lucas blocked her path. "You can't just leave," he said. His voice was shaking. "You destroyed my life." Elena stopped. She looked him in the eye. "You destroyed your own life, Lucas," she said. "I'm just the curator." She stepped around him. She walked out into the hallway. Lucas was left standing in the ruin of his affair. Sophie was screaming now, screaming at him, throwing things. But Lucas didn't hear her. He was listening to the sound of Elena's footsteps walking away. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a countdown reaching 0. The hallway outside Sophie's apartment was quiet, a vacuum of sound that swallowed Lucas's heavy breathing. The door to apartment 1204 had slammed shut in his face, but not before he heard the sound of glass breaking inside. Sophie was destroying things. Vases, picture frames, the remnants of the life he had bought for her. He stood there, staring at the wood grain of the door. He raised a hand to knock, to beg, to explain that it was just an accounting error, just a label. But his hand froze in mid-air. He knew it was futile. The office supplies receipt was not an error. It was a choice. A choice of convenience. A choice that stripped the humanity from an unborn child and turned it into a tax write-off. There was no spinning that. Even a man with Lucas's silver tongue couldn't talk his way out of that level of callousness. He lowered his hand. He turned and walked toward the elevator. His legs felt heavy, as if gravity had increased just for him. The elevator ride down was a descent into hell. The mirrored walls reflected a man who was fraying at the edges. His tie was crooked. His hair was dishevelled. His eyes were wild, darting around as if looking for an exit from his own skin. He walked out into the lobby. The concierge glared at him. Security was already on the phone, probably calling the police. Lucas pushed through the revolving doors and out into the street. It was raining again. Of course it was raining. The city was weeping. He walked to his rental car. A parking ticket fluttered under the wiper blade. He ripped it off and crumpled it, throwing it into the gutter. He got in the car. He sat there, gripping the steering wheel. What now? He had 2 wars to fight, the war with Sophie and the war with Elena. Sophie was a liability. She was volatile, hurt, and armed with dangerous information. But Sophie was also young and fragile. She might crumble. She might run away. Elena was the real threat. Elena was the tectonic plate shifting under his feet. He started the car. He didn't go home. He couldn't face the house yet. He couldn't face the smell of turpentine and the accusatory stare of his wife. He drove to his office. The headquarters of Vance Tech was a glass monolith in the Pearl District. It was a monument to his ego. He parked in his reserved spot. CEO. The letters were painted in bold white on the concrete. He swiped his badge. The beep was reassuring. He still had access. He still had power here. He took the private elevator to the top floor. His assistant, Jessica, was at her desk. She looked up as he stormed in, and she looked surprised. "Mr. Vance, I thought you were taking personal leave." "I'm catching up on some things," Lucas muttered, marching past her. "Hold my calls." "Sir, wait," Jessica called out, standing up. "Ms. Miller." "Sophie. She sent an email." Lucas stopped. He turned slowly. "What?" "About 20 minutes ago," Jessica said. Her face was pale. She looked uncomfortable. She sent a resignation letter to HR, and she CC'd the entire executive board. Lucas felt the blood drain from his head. "What did it say?" Jessica hesitated. She looked down at her screen. "It says she is resigning effective immediately due to untenable ethical conflicts and hostile work environment created by executive leadership." "Is that all?" Lucas asked. Hostile work environment was bad, but vague. He could spin that. He could say she was underperforming and disgruntled. "There was an attachment," Jessica whispered. "What attachment?" "A scan," Jessica said, "of a credit card statement. It had some highlighted charges." Lucas closed his eyes. The room spun. The office supplies. She had done it. Sophie had pressed the nuclear button. She hadn't just broken up with him. She had nuked his professional reputation. "Get HR on the phone," Lucas rasped. "And legal. Now!" He slammed the door to his office. He collapsed into his leather chair. the throne he had worked 20 years to build. He looked out the window at the grey city. They were coming for him, both of them, the wife and the mistress. They had formed an unholy alliance of destruction. His phone rang. It was the chairman of the board. Lucas let it ring. He reached into his bottom drawer and pulled out a bottle of Macallan 25. He didn't bother with a glass. He took a long, burning swig from the bottle. He needed a plan. He needed to stop the bleeding. He couldn't fight Sophie on the corporate front right now. That damage was done. He had to contain the source. He had to stop Elena. Elena was the architect. Elena was the one who showed Sophie the papers. Elena was the one fueling this fire. If he could discredit Elena, if he could prove she was unstable. He looked at the bottle. He looked at the rain. A plan began to form. It was a desperate, ugly plan. But he was a desperate, ugly man. She is painting death, he thought. She is mute. She is hallucinating. She is a danger to herself. If he could get her committed, if he could get a psychiatric hold, he would have power of attorney. He could freeze her assets. He could stop the exhibition. He could bury the paintings in a basement somewhere and claim she was having a breakdown. It was his word against hers. The word of a respected CEO against a traumatized, mute artist who painted corpses. He took another drink. The alcohol gave him courage. It gave him the illusion of control. "I'm coming for you, Elle," he whispered. The drive home was a blur of adrenaline and whiskey. Lucas was legally drunk, but his focus was razor sharp. He was on a mission. He arrived at the mansion at 4:00 p.m. The house was quiet. The front door was unlocked. He walked in. The smell of turpentine hit him immediately. It was stronger today. It smelled like a chemical fire. He walked into the living room. It had been transformed. Elena had moved the furniture. The expensive Italian leather sofas were pushed against the walls. The centre of the room was a maze of easels and canvases. It looked like a gallery of nightmares. There were 10 paintings now. The crash, the ambulance, the mud, Sophie's leg, Lucas's face in the rearview mirror, the office supplies receipt. She had painted it huge, abstract, the numbers dripping like black blood. And in the centre, a new one. It was a portrait of Lucas, but he wasn't human. He was a suit filled with maggots. His smile was dazzling, but his eyes were empty sockets. Lucas stared at it. He felt violated. "Do you like it?" The voice came from the shadows. Eleanor was sitting in the corner, in a wing-back chair. She was wearing her painting clothes, the stained coveralls. She had a glass of wine in her hand. She looked calm, regal, even in the filth. "You're sick," Lucas said. His voice was thick with drink. "I am expressive," Elena corrected. "This is insane," Lucas gestured around the room. "Look at this. You're obsessed with death. You're obsessed with ruining me." "I am documenting reality," Elena said. "You don't like the style?" "I'm shutting it down," Lucas said. He took a step toward her. "I'm calling Dr. Aris. I'm calling the hospital. You're having a breakdown. You're a danger to yourself." Elena swirled her wine. "Am I?" "Yes," Lucas shouted. "Look at this place. It's a slaughterhouse. You're traumatized, Elena. You need help. You need to go back to the facility for a long rest. And while I'm resting, Elena said, her voice cool, you will take control of the finances again. You will explain away the fraud. You will tell the world your poor wife lost her mind after the accident. It's for your own good, Lucas lied. He believed it, almost. You can't handle reality. Elena stood up. She set the wineglass down. I handle reality just fine, Lucas, she said. I handled the reality of the mud. I handled the reality of the scalpel. I handled the reality of your betrayal. She walked over to a small table near the easel. There was a digital recorder on it, a small black device with a red light blinking. What is that? Lucas asked. Insurance, Elena said. She pressed a button. Lucas's voice filled the room. I panic. You know I panic. I saved her because she was weak. You're strong. Click. She pressed another button. Sophie's voice. You chose me. You promised we'd go to Paris. You said she was boring. Click. She pressed another. Lucas's voice from 20 minutes ago, recorded on the home security system. I'm coming for you, Elle. Lucas stared at the device. You've been recording me? Since the hospital, Elena said. Every conversation, every phone call you made from the landline, every lie. That's illegal, Lucas said weakly. Actually, Oregon is a one-party consent state for recording if there is an expectation of a crime, Elena said. And fraud is a crime, Lucas. Domestic abuse is a crime. I never hit you. Gaslighting is abuse, Elena said. Abandonment at a crash scene is negligence. Financial theft is fraud. She picked up the recorder. If you try to commit me, she said, if you try to touch my money or my art or my freedom, I will release these, not just to the board, to the police, to the news. Lucas stood there, swaying. The room felt like it was tilting. The paintings seemed to be laughing at him. The maggots in his portrait seemed to be writhing. He realised he had no moves left. Checkmate. What do you want? He whispered. Do you want a divorce? Take half. Take the house. Just stop this. Elena looked at him. She walked closer. She was close enough to smell the whiskey on his breath. Half? She asked. She laughed. It was a dry, humourless sound. I don't want half, Lucas. I earned the whole thing. I built the foundation you stood on. I managed your ego. I managed your life. And you tried to kill me for a discount. She leaned in. I want it all. You can't have it all, Lucas sneered, a spark of defiance returning. I am Vance Tech. Without me, the company is nothing. Watch me, Elena said. She turned her back on him. The exhibition opens in 3 days, she said. You are the guest of honour. I'm not coming, Lucas said. Oh, you will, Elena said. Because if you don't, I release the office supplies recording to the IRS, and you will go to prison for tax evasion. Lucas stared at her back. He wanted to hit her. He wanted to strangle her. The violence was bubbling under his skin, hot and demanding. He looked at the heavy brass poker by the fireplace. Elena didn't turn around, but she spoke. Don't even think about it, Lucas. The cameras are rolling. She pointed to the corner of the ceiling. A small new camera lens glinted in the shadows. Lucas dropped his hands. He let out a primal scream of frustration. The sound echoed off the glass walls, useless and impotent. He turned and ran. He ran out of the living room, out of the house, into the rain. He couldn't be here. He couldn't be near her. She wasn't human anymore. She was a vengeful deity. Lucas spent the next 2 days in a hotel, the Ritz-Carlton, the same place he used to take Sophie. He lay in the king-sized bed, watching the news. Vance Tech stock plummets amidst executive resignation rumours. Sophie Miller exits Vance Tech. Whistleblower or disgruntled ex? Who is the mystery artist Elena Vai? Gallery announces shocking debut. The world was talking about them. He tried to call his lawyers. They were evasive. We're looking into the situation, Mr. Vance. It's a complex matter. Mrs. Vance has retained the firm of Sharks and Vipers. Not literally, but effectively. He was isolated. He drank. He ordered room service and didn't eat it. He paced the room. He thought about the exhibition, the empty seat. He had to go. She had trapped him. If he didn't go, he went to jail. If he went, he faced public humiliation. But maybe he could control the narrative at the event. He was charming. He was Lucas Vance. He could work a room. He could stand next to the paintings and laugh. My wife is so talented, so dark. It's a metaphor for the market. He could spin it. He had to spin it. It was his only chance. He stopped drinking on the morning of the 3rd day. He showered. He shaved. He put on his best suit, a charcoal Armani. He looked in the mirror. He looked tired, yes, but he looked powerful. You can do this, he told his reflection. It's just art. It's just paint on wood. It can't hurt you. He was wrong. The gallery was located in the trendy Pearl District, an old warehouse converted into a stark white space. It was raining, of course. When Lucas arrived, the street was blocked, not by construction, but by cars. Black limousines. Teslas. The elite of Portland had turned out. Curiosity is a powerful magnet. The rumours of the scandalous art, the Vance Tech connection, and the reclusive wife had created a frenzy. Lucas stepped out of his car. Flashbulbs popped. Click, 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 click. Mr. Vance, is it true the paintings are about you? Mr. Vance, any comment on Sophie Miller? Mr. Vance, is your wife seeking divorce? He ignored them. He put on his 1,000-watt smile. He waved. He walked into the gallery like he owned it. Inside, it was crowded. Waiters circulated with champagne. The air buzzed with conversation. But as Lucas entered, the conversation died. Heads turned. The crowd parted. They weren't looking at him with admiration. They were looking at him with morbid fascination, like he was a man walking to the gallows. He looked at the walls. The paintings were massive, lit by dramatic spotlights. They were even more terrifying in this setting. The red paint looked wet. The black looked infinite. He saw his colleagues, the CFO, the VP of marketing. They were standing in front of the office supplies receipt. They were whispering. They saw him and quickly looked away, pretending to examine their shoes. He saw the Davises, their neighbours. Mrs. Davis looked at him with pure disgust and turned her back. Lucas felt a bead of sweat roll down his spine. His spin control wasn't working. The art was too loud. It spoke the truth too clearly. Lucas. He turned. Elena was standing in the centre of the room. She looked breathtaking. She was wearing a dress he had never seen. It was black, backless, made of silk that flowed like liquid. But it wasn't a cocktail dress. It was structural, sharp, almost like armour. Her hair was down, a dark cascade. Her lips were painted a deep crimson, the same colour as the blood in the paintings. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like the queen of the underworld. "You came," she said. Her voice was amplified. She was wearing a small microphone. The room went silent. Everyone turned to watch the performance. "I wouldn't miss it," Lucas said, his voice tight. He tried to step closer, to kiss her cheek, to simulate intimacy. She took a step back, a smooth, deliberate rejection. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena said, addressing the crowd. Her voice was calm, melodic. "Thank you for coming to the empty seat." She swept a hand toward the paintings. "This collection is a study of choices," she said. "We make choices every day. What to eat, what to wear, which turn to take." She looked at Lucas. "And sometimes," she continued, "we have to make hard choices. Who to save and who to leave behind." The crowd murmured. They knew the rumours. This was delicious. "My husband, Lucas," Elena gestured to him. He felt like a bug pinned to a board. "He is a man of decisive action. He taught me that sometimes you have to sacrifice the thing you claim to love in order to survive." Lucas forced a smile. "Elena is very dramatic," he said to the room. "Artists, you know." "Tonight," Elena said, ignoring him, "I want to unveil the final piece, the centrepiece of the collection." She pointed to a large object in the centre of the room, covered by a black velvet cloth. Lucas frowned. He hadn't seen this one at the house. "This piece is not a painting," Elena said. "It is an installation. It is interactive." She walked over to the cloth. "It represents the future," she said. She pulled the cloth. The crowd gasped. It was a seat. Specifically, it was the passenger seat from the wrecked SUV. She had had it salvaged. It was twisted, metal protruding like broken ribs. The leather was stained with dark, rusty patches. Dried blood. Her blood. And sitting on the seat, in the centre of the bloodstain, was a single object, a smartphone. Lucas recognised it. It was his old phone, the one he thought was lost in the crash, the one that contained the text messages, the photos, the evidence. "This phone," Elena said, "was recovered from the wreckage. It survived, just like me." She looked at Lucas. "And it is unlocked." Lucas felt his heart stop. The phone was connected to a projector. On the far wall, a screen lit up. It wasn't a painting. It was a slideshow. Text message. Sophie, Septi 12. "I hate hiding. When will you tell her?" Text message. Lucas, Septi 12. "Soon. She's so boring, I can't stand it. Just need to secure the assets first." The crowd gasped. Text message. Lucas, Octa 15, 2 o'clock p.m. "Driving now. Can't wait to be at the hotel with you. She's asleep in the back. Ugh. Photo. A selfie of Lucas and Sophie kissing in the car, while Elena slept in the background, visible in the frame. The room was dead silent. The only sound was the projector clicking to the next slide. Lucas stood frozen. He was naked, stripped of every lie, every defence, every shred of dignity. He looked at the crowd. He saw their phones out. They were recording. They were streaming. He looked at his board members. They were shaking their heads. This was the end. Vance Tech could survive a scandal, but it couldn't survive this level of public moral bankruptcy. He looked at Elena. She wasn't looking at the screen. She was looking at him. She wasn't smiling. She looked sad. A deep, profound sadness for the time she had wasted on him. "The exhibition is open," Elena whispered into the microphone. Then she took the microphone off. She placed it on the bloody seat. She turned and walked away. She walked through the crowd. They parted for her like the Red Sea. They looked at her with awe. Lucas was left standing alone in the centre of the room, illuminated by the projection of his own sins. He fell to his knees, not for effect this time, but because his legs simply ceased to function. He looked up at the screen. The final slide appeared. It was a bank transfer receipt. Payee, Sophie Miller. Memo, office supplies. And below it, a single line of text added by the artist. The cost of doing business. Lucas put his head in his hands. Outside, the rain stopped. The clouds broke. And somewhere in the city, Elena Vance walked out into the cool, clean air, took a deep breath, and finally, truly, began to live. The morning after the exhibition, the sun did not rise in Portland. The sky remained a bruised shade of purple, heavy with a storm that refused to break. Lucas woke up on the floor of his hotel room. He was still wearing his tuxedo from the night before. The shirt was unbuttoned, stained with sweat and the cheap whiskey from the minibar. One of his cufflinks was missing. He didn't move for a long time. He lay on the carpet, staring at the dust motes dancing in the sliver of light from the gap in the curtains. He wished, for a brief, terrifying moment, that he had died in the crash. If he had died, he would be a tragedy. A brilliant visionary cut down in his prime. There would be statues of him. The new wing of the Children's Hospital would be named the Lucas Vance Centre. Elena would be the grieving widow, weeping elegantly at his graveside. But he had lived. And because he lived, he was this. A man on the floor, listening to his phone vibrate on the nightstand. Buzz. 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 It had been buzzing for 6 hours. He crawled over to it. He picked it up. The notifications were a waterfall of disaster. New York Times. Tech moguls fall from grace. The art of exposure. Wall Street Journal. Vance Tech shares. Plunge 18% in pre-market trading. Twitter. An empty seat is the #1 trending topic worldwide. Voicemail. Mr. Vance, this is Special Agent Miller from the IRS. Please return my call immediately regarding an audit of your personal and business accounts. Lucas dropped the phone. It felt hot, radioactive. He stood up. His knees cracked. His head throbbed with a chemical headache. He walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The man staring back was unrecognisable. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red. His skin was grey. The handsome, charming CEO was gone. In his place was a frightened animal. He turned on the tap. He splashed cold water on his face. "Fix it," he whispered to the mirror. "You can fix this. You always fix it." He was delusional, but delusion was the only fuel he had left. He stripped off the ruined tuxedo. He showered, scrubbing his skin until it was pink, trying to wash away the feeling of 1,000 eyes watching him. He put on a fresh suit, a power suit, navy blue, red tie, the uniform of authority. He was going to the office. He was going to face the board. He would explain that it was a smear campaign. He would say Elena was mentally unstable, that the evidence was doctored deep fakes. He would threaten, cajole, and charm his way out of the pit. He grabbed his briefcase. He walked out of the hotel room. He didn't know it yet, but he was walking into his own execution. The lobby of Vance Tech was usually a cathedral of silence and efficiency. Today, it was a circus. Reporters were camped outside the glass doors. News vans lined the street. When Lucas's car pulled up, the crowd surged forward. "Mr. Vance, did you embezzle funds?" "Mr. Vance, is it true you left your wife to die?" "Lucas, look here!" Security guards had to form a phalanx to get him to the door. Lucas kept his head down, ignoring the microphones thrust into his face. He burst into the lobby, breathless. "Get them out of here," he shouted at the head of security, a man named Frank. Frank looked at him. He didn't salute. He didn't jump. He just looked at Lucas with a flat, unreadable expression. "They're on public property, sir," Frank said. "Can't touch them." "I don't pay you to tell me the law. I pay you to protect me," Lucas snapped. "Actually, sir," Frank said, crossing his massive arms, "you don't pay me anymore." Lucas froze. "What?" "Board directive," Frank said, "issued at 8:00 a.m. Your access is revoked pending the emergency meeting." "I am the CEO," Lucas screamed. His voice echoed off the marble walls, shrill and desperate. "I built this building. I hired you." "And the board fired you," Frank said. "You have a meeting in the executive conference room. You are to be escorted. You are not allowed to touch any terminals." Lucas stared at him. He felt small. "Fine," Lucas spat. "Escort me. But when I walk out of there reinstated, you're the first one gone, Frank." Frank didn't blink. He gestured to the elevator. "After you." The ride up to the 40th floor was silent. Lucas adjusted his tie. He rehearsed his opening line. "Gentlemen, we are victims of a sophisticated attack on our stock price." The doors opened. The hallway was empty. His assistant's desk was cleared. Jessica was gone. No loyal gatekeeper to hand him coffee. He walked to the double doors of the boardroom. He pushed them open. The room was full. The entire board of directors was there. 12 men and women who controlled the fate of the company. Usually, they stood when he entered. Today, they remained seated. At the head of the table, his seat, sat the chairman, Arthur Pendleton. Arthur was 70, a man of old money and rigid morals. He looked at Lucas over his spectacles. "Sit down, Lucas," Arthur said. He pointed to a small chair set apart from the table. The witness chair. Lucas didn't sit. He stood tall, gripping the back of the chair. "Arthur," Lucas said, projecting confidence. "I know how this looks. The exhibition, it was performance art. Shock value. My wife has been suffering from severe PTSD since the accident. She's not in her right mind. The evidence shown was fabricated to create a narrative. He looked around the room, making eye contact. Are we really going to let a domestic dispute derail a billion-dollar company? Lucas asked. We have the Q4 launch next week. The market will stabilise. I just need... Stop, Arthur said. The word was soft, but it stopped Lucas like a wall. Arthur slid a folder across the table. We had the forensic auditors in all night, Lucas, Arthur said. After the office supplies image went viral, we had a fiduciary duty to check. Lucas felt his stomach drop. And, Lucas choked out. It wasn't just the abortion, Arthur said. The word hung in the air, ugly and clinical. That was just the tip of the iceberg. You've been using the company as your personal piggy bank for 5 years. The jewellery, the trips, the consulting fees to Ms. Miller. I intended to pay it back, Lucas cried. It was a loan structure. It was embezzlement, Arthur corrected, totalling $420,000. That's a felony, Lucas. We are obligated to report it to the SEC and the DOJ. Arthur, please, Lucas's voice cracked. I can fix it. I'll write a check today. You don't have the money, Arthur said brutally. We froze your stock options this morning, and your personal assets are currently being frozen by your wife's legal team. Lucas sagged. He gripped the chair for support. We are terminating you for cause, Arthur read from a paper. Violation of the Code of Ethics, moral turpitude, financial malfeasance. There will be no severance package, no golden parachute. Your health insurance expires at midnight. You can't do this, Lucas whispered. I am Vance Tech. Not anymore, Arthur said. Now, you are a liability. Arthur stood up. Security will escort you out. You have 10 minutes to collect personal items. Nothing digital. No files. Arthur, Lucas begged. I have nothing else. This company, it's my life. Arthur looked at him with a mixture of pity and revulsion. You should have thought of that before you left your wife in a ravine, son. Arthur turned his back. The other board members looked away. Frank, the security guard, stepped forward. He placed a heavy hand on Lucas's shoulder. Time to go, sir. Lucas allowed himself to be led out. He walked like a sleepwalker. He didn't look at the office he had designed. He didn't look at the view of the city he used to rule. He was walked to the elevator, down to the lobby, and shoved out the revolving doors. The cameras flashed. The reporters shouted. Lucas Vance, the boy wonder of Portland Tech, stood on the sidewalk, holding a box containing a stapler and a framed photo of himself. It started to rain. The legal meeting took place 3 days later. Lucas had been staying in a Motel 6 near the airport, and the Ritz-Carlton had politely asked him to leave after his credit card was declined. He wore the same suit. It was wrinkled now. He hadn't shaved. The meeting was at the offices of Sharks and Vipers, formerly known as Sterling and Howes. It was a high-rise building that smelled of money and intimidation. Lucas sat on one side of a massive glass conference table. His lawyer was a public defender named Gary. Gary was 25, overworked, and clearly out of his depth. Lucas couldn't afford his usual legal team anymore. On the other side of the table sat Elena. She looked radiant. She wore a white suit, sharp, tailored, pristine. It was the colour of a blank canvas. She wore no jewellery except for a simple pair of diamond studs. Her hands were folded on the table. She didn't look at Lucas. She looked at a point somewhere above his left shoulder. Next to her was her lawyer, a woman named Ms. Sterling. Ms. Sterling was known as the guillotine. She smiled at Lucas. It was not a friendly smile. "Mr. Vance," Ms. Sterling began, "we are here to finalise the dissolution of the marriage and the division of assets." "I want to talk to my wife," Lucas said. His voice was hoarse. "Address all comments to me," Ms. Sterling said. "Elena." Lucas ignored her. He leaned forward. "Elena, look at me. Please." Elena continued to stare at the wall. She was present, but unreachable. She was a statue carved from ice. "We were happy once," Lucas pleaded. "Remember the trip to Cabo? Remember when we adopted the dog? You can't just erase 20 years because I made mistakes." "Mistakes," Ms. Sterling repeated, tasting the word like sour milk. "Let's review the mistakes, shall we?" She opened a file. Attempted manslaughter by negligence at the crash site, adultery, embezzlement of marital funds, emotional abuse, fraud. She slid a document across the table. It was thick. "This is the settlement agreement," Ms. Sterling said. "You will sign it." Lucas looked at Gary, his public defender. Gary shrugged helplessly. It's pretty standard, given the circumstances, Mr. Vance. The prenup was voided by the infidelity clause." Lucas looked at the document. Primary residence. Transferred to Elena Vance. Liquid assets. Transferred to Elena Vance. Art collection. Retained by Elena Vance. Vance tech stock. Liquidated. Proceeds transferred to Elena Vance as restitution for embezzled funds. "What do I get?" Lucas asked, flipping through the pages. "You get the debt," Ms. Sterling said cheerfully. "You retain the liability for the pending IRS audit. You retain the liability for the lawsuit filed by Ms. Sophie Miller for workplace harassment. And you get to keep your car. The Porsche." "The Porsche?" Lucas blinked. "Why the Porsche?" "Because it has a blown transmission and outstanding payments of $15,000, Ms. Sterling said. "Elena doesn't want it." Lucas looked at Elena. "You're leaving me with nothing? No house? No money? How am I supposed to live?" Elena finally moved. She slowly turned her head. Her eyes locked onto his. They were not angry eyes. They were completely void of emotion. It was like looking into a deep, cold well. "You are a visionary, Lucas," Elena said softly. Her voice was clear, the rasp almost gone. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." "Elena." "Sign the papers," she commanded. "And if I don't?" Lucas challenged. "If I fight this, if I drag this out in court for years?" Elena smiled. She reached into her white purse. She pulled out a small USB drive. "Then I release the rest," she said. "The rest?" Lucas frowned. "What rest? You showed everything at the gallery." "Oh, Lucas," Elena shook her head. "That was just the trailer. I have hours of audio. I have the dashcam footage from the rental car. I have the emails you thought you deleted." She placed the USB drive on the table. "I have the recording of you laughing with your broker about hiding assets in the Caymans," she said. That's federal prison time, Lucas. 5 to 10 years. Lucas stared at the silver stick. It was a bullet aimed at his heart. He looked at Gary. Gary was packing up his briefcase. "Sign it, Mr. Vance," Gary whispered. "She's not bluffing. I can't keep you out of jail if she gives that to the feds." Lucas picked up the pen. It felt heavy, like a bar of lead. He looked at the paper. Dissolution of marriage. He signed. He signed away the house. He signed away the money. He signed away the last tether to the life he had known. Ms. Sterling snatched the papers away the moment the ink touched the page. "Done," she said. "We will file this afternoon." Elena stood up. She smoothed her white suit. She picked up her purse. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't look back. She walked out of the conference room, her heels clicking on the glass floor. Click, click, click. Lucas sat alone in the room. "Well," Gary said, standing up. "Good luck, Mr. Vance. But I have another client in 20 minutes. Grand Theft Auto. Easier case." Gary left. Lucas sat in the silence. He had the Porsche. He had his debt. And he had his freedom. But freedom, he was realising, was a terrifying thing when you had nowhere to go. An hour later, Lucas drove the Porsche to the mansion. He knew the codes had been changed. He knew he couldn't get in, but he had to see it. He had to see the castle he had lost. He parked at the bottom of the driveway. The gate was closed. He looked up the hill. The house was glowing. Lights were on in every room. It looked warm, inviting. Through the massive living room window, the one where he had screamed in frustration days ago, he saw her. Elena was moving. She was dancing. She wasn't dancing wildly. She was moving slowly, swaying to music he couldn't hear. She held a glass of wine in one hand and a paintbrush in the other. She was painting over the black canvas. She was covering the darkness with white, layer by layer, erasing the crash, erasing the maggots, erasing him. She looked light, unburdened. Lucas watched her for a long time. The rain drummed on the roof of the Porsche. He realised then that she hadn't just taken his money, she had taken his narrative. For 20 years he had been the main character. He was the hero, the provider, the genius. She was the supporting actress. Now the movie was over, and it turned out it was never his movie. It was hers. He was just the villain who provided the conflict for her transformation. He started the car. The engine rattled. The transmission whined. He put it in reverse. He backed out of the driveway. He didn't know where he was going. Maybe a bar. Maybe a bridge. Maybe just away. He drove into the night. A man who had purchased a single seat in an ambulance at the cost of his entire world. Behind him, on the hill, Elena Vance continued to paint, turning the darkness into light, stroke by stroke. Gravity is a relentless master. It pulls cars off cliffs, and it pulls men from penthouses to the pavement. 2 weeks had passed since the signing of the papers. Lucas Vance was living in the Porsche 911. It was a cruel irony. The car was a masterpiece of German engineering, a symbol of status and speed. But as a home, it was a torture chamber. The bucket seats, designed for high G cornering, did not recline fully. The leather, once supple and smelling of wealth, now smelled of stale fast food and unwashed body. He was parked in a Walmart parking lot on the outskirts of Vancouver, Washington. He had crossed the bridge to avoid the Portland police, who knew his car and his face. It was 3 a.m. The arc lights of the parking lot buzzed overhead, bathing the world in a sickly sodium orange glow. Lucas shivered. The engine was off to save gas. The heater was cold. He was wearing his charcoal Armani suit, but it was ruined. The cuffs were frayed, the collar grey with grime. He had sold his overcoat 3 days ago for $40 to buy gas and beef jerky. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked like a spectre, a ghost haunting a luxury vehicle. His stomach cramped. Hunger was a new sensation for Lucas. Not the polite appetite before a reservation at a Michelin star restaurant, but a gnawing, acidic hollowness that made his hands shake. He reached into the glove box. He pulled out a granola bar. It was the last one. He unwrapped it slowly, cherishing the sound of the foil. He took a bite. It tasted like sawdust and sugar. It tasted like survival. His phone was dead. He hadn't been able to pay the bill, so the service was cut. He could only use Wi-Fi at coffee shops, hovering outside the glass like a moth, trying to catch a signal to check his email. But there were no emails, no job offers, no "come back, please" from the board. Just silence. He finished the granola bar. He licked the wrapper. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep. But every time he drifted off, he heard the sound. Thud. The sound of the ambulance door closing. It was the soundtrack of his hell. 5 miles away, across the river, the Vance mansion was silent, but it was not Emma'e's. Elena was awake. She was standing on the terrace, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, watching the dawn struggle to break through the clouds. The air was crisp and clean. She took a deep breath. Her lungs, once crushed and filled with fluid, expanded fully. It didn't hurt anymore. The physical pain had faded to a dull, weather-dependent ache in her side. A reminder, not a sentence. She turned and walked back inside. The living room, the gallery of nightmares, was empty. She had burned the paintings. It had been a private ceremony in the backyard 2 nights ago. She had taken the crash, the ambulance, and the portrait of Lucas with maggots, and she had thrown them into a bonfire. Watching them burn had been cathartic. The black smoke curled up into the night, carrying away the rage. She didn't need the anger anymore. The anger had served its purpose. It had fueled her survival. It had powered her strike. But holding on to anger is like holding on to a hot coal. Eventually, it burns you too. Now, the easels were fresh. She walked over to the main canvas. It was huge, spanning 6 feet. It was white, but not just white. It was textured. She had used heavy impasto, layering shades of cream, bone, eggshell, and titanium. If you looked closely, you could see shapes emerging from the texture. A wing? A wave? A scar healing over? It was titled Tabula Rasa. Clean slate. She picked up a brush. She dipped it in a mixture of linseed oil and white pigment. She painted a single, thin line of pale gold running through the white. Kintsugi, she thought. The Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, making the break a part of the history, not something to disguise. She was the pottery. The crash was the break. Her new life was the gold. The doorbell rang. Elena paused. She checked the time. 7 a.m. Too early for the mail. She walked to the security monitor. On the screen was a woman. She was leaning on a cane. She wore a simple raincoat and a backpack. It was Sophie. Elena stared at the screen. Her pulse quickened slightly, a reflex. She hesitated. She could leave her there. She could turn off the intercom. She owed Sophie nothing. Sophie had been the co-conspirator in her destruction, but Sophie was also a casualty. Elena pressed the button. Gate is open. She went to the front door and opened it. Sophie limped up the driveway. The walk looked painful. Her leg was out of the cast, but she moved with a hitch, a permanent alteration to her stride. She stopped at the bottom of the steps. She looked up at Elena. They studied each other. Two women defined by the same man, now defined by his absence. "I didn't think you'd open the gate," Sophie said. Her voice was older, tired. The bubbly, ambitious girl from the rest stop was gone. "I almost didn't," Elena admitted. "Why are you here?" Sophie shifted her weight off her bad leg. "I'm leaving Portland, moving back to California. My aunt has a place in Sacramento. It's quieter." "Good," Elena said. "I came to drop this off." Sophie reached into her backpack. She pulled out a small velvet box. She walked up 2 steps and placed it on the porch. "He gave it to me," Sophie said. "The Cartier bracelet, the one he bought with your retirement fund." Elena looked at the box. "I pawned the rest," Sophie said, a flash of bitterness in her eyes. "The earrings, the necklace. I used the money to pay my legal fees for the harassment suit. But this one felt too heavy. It belongs to you, or the account, whatever." Elena didn't move to pick it up. "You could have sold it," Elena said. "Cartier holds its value." "It's cursed," Sophie said. "I don't want his ghost on my wrist." Sophie turned to go. Then she stopped. "Elena?" "Yes." "In the ambulance," Sophie said, staring at the wet pavement. "When the doors closed, I saw you. I saw you lying there. And for a second, I was glad." Elena went still. "I was glad it wasn't me," Sophie whispered. "I was glad I won. I wanted to be the one he chose." She looked back up at Elena. Her eyes were wet. "But I didn't win, did I? I got into a vehicle with a man who leaves people behind. I didn't get saved. I just got delayed." "Yes," Elena said softly. "You got into the hearse." Sophie nodded. "I'm sorry. Not for sleeping with him. I can't apologise for that, it happened. But I am sorry that I let him leave you there. I should have screamed for them to stop, but I was a coward." "We all want to live, Sophie," Elena said. "Survival makes us ugly." "You aren't ugly," Sophie said. She looked at Elena's face, at the calm strength there. "You look clean." "Safe travels, Sophie," Elena said. Sophie nodded. She turned and limped down the driveway. She didn't look back. She got into a beat-up Honda Civic, parked on the street, and drove away. Elena looked at the velvet box on the porch. She picked it up. She opened it. The diamond bracelet glittered in the grey light. It was beautiful. It was worth $20,000. She closed the box. She walked inside. She went to the kitchen and dropped the box into the trash compactor. She pressed the button. Crunch. She made herself a cup of tea. Earl Grey. Hot. Lucas ran out of gas at noon. The Porsche sputtered and died on a side street near a pawn shop in downtown Portland. He coasted to the curb. This was it, the end of the line. He got out. He locked the car, out of habit, though he doubted anyone would steal it in this condition. He walked into the pawn shop. A bell jingled. The air smelled of dust and old dreams. The walls were lined with guitars, power tools, and jewellery. The pawnbroker was a large man behind bulletproof glass. He was eating a sandwich. "Help you?" he grunted. Lucas approached the window. He unclasped the Rolex from his wrist. It was a Submariner, blue dial, steel and gold. Elena had given it to him for his 40th birthday. It was engraved on the back. To Lucas, "My time is yours. Love, L." He hadn't looked at the inscription in years. He looked at it now. "My time is yours." He felt a lump in his throat. He swallowed it down. He slid the watch through the metal tray. "I need cash," Lucas said. "It's a Rolex Submariner. Authentic. Box and papers are lost. But you can check the serial number." The pawnbroker picked up the watch. He didn't look impressed. He put a jeweller's loupe to his eye and inspected it. "It's scratched," the man said. "Crystal has a chip." "It's worth 15,000, Lucas said. "Minimum." The man laughed. "In a boutique, maybe. Here, without papers, and looking like you stole it." Lucas straightened his spine. "I am Lucas Vance. I was the CEO of Vance Tech. I did not steal it." The pawnbroker looked at him. He recognized the face. "Oh, yeah," the man smirked. "The guy from the news, the ambulance guy." Lucas flinched. That was his name now, the ambulance guy. "Look, buddy," the pawnbroker said. "I don't care who you were. I care what this is worth to me. I got 3 of these in the back. Market is flooded." He pushed the watch back slightly. $2,000. Take it or leave it." 2,000? Lucas was incredulous. "That's robbery." "That's business," the man said. "You want it or not? You look like you could use a meal." Lucas looked at the watch. $2,000. It would get him a motel room for a week, some food, a bus ticket to somewhere. He looked at the engraving one last time. "My time is yours." "Take it," Lucas whispered. The man counted out 20 $100 bills. He slid them through the slot. He took the watch and threw it into a bin behind him like it was a piece of junk. Clatter. Lucas took the money. He didn't count it. He stuffed it into his pocket and walked out. He felt lighter and emptier. The last link to Elena was gone. He walked down the street. He found a diner. He ordered a steak, eggs, hash browns, coffee. He ate voraciously. He wiped the plate clean with bread. When he was done, he sat with the coffee. He had $1,950 left. He could go to Seattle, start over, change his name. But his feet didn't want to go to the bus station. They wanted to go somewhere else. He walked out of the diner and hailed a cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Highway 101, Lucas said. "The coast." "That's a long ride, pal. Going to cost you a few hundred." Lucas threw $500 on the front seat. Just drive. The drive took 2 hours. Lucas stared out the window as the city gave way to the forests, and the forests gave way to the misty coastline. They reached the spot. The curve in the road. the jagged hole in the guardrail that had been hastily repaired with orange netting. "Stop here," Lucas said. "Here?" the driver asked. "There's nothing here but a cliff." "I know. Stop." Lucas got out. The wind was howling. The ocean below was churning, grey and violent. He stood on the edge of the road. He looked down. He could see the scars on the trees where the SUV had crashed through. He could see the glint of broken glass still embedded in the mud. He closed his eyes. He replayed the moment. The spinning. The impact. The silence. Elena? Sophie? The choice. He had stood right here. The ambulance had been parked right there. He realised now that he hadn't made a choice between two women. He had made a choice between two versions of himself. He had chosen the version that was selfish, cowardly, and superficial, and in doing so, he had killed the man he could have been. He stepped over the orange netting. He slid down the embankment. His expensive shoes slipped in the mud. He ruined his suit pants. He didn't care. He scrambled down to the ledge where the car had rested. It was empty now, just a muddy scar on the earth. He sat down in the mud. He sat exactly where Elena had lain. He looked up at the road. It seemed so high up. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The wind snatched the words away. He sat there for a long time. The cold seeped into his bones. The rain began to fall. He wasn't going to jump. That would be too easy. That would be another escape. He had to live. He had to live with the knowledge of what he was. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the wad of cash. He looked at it. The price of his watch. The price of his time. He let go of $100 bill. The wind caught it. It fluttered up like a green bird, dancing over the cliffs, and disappeared into the grey ocean. He let go of another, and another. He fed his money to the wind. When his pockets were empty, he sat in the mud, shivering, wet, and destitute. For the first time in 20 years, Lucas Vance was entirely honest. He was nothing. A week later, Elena was in her studio. The light was perfect. The tabula rasa series was complete. 6 white paintings. They were quiet, meditative, and incredibly powerful. Her agent, a new one, not the local gallery owner, but a representative from New York, was visiting. "They are magnificent, Elena," the agent said, adjusting his glasses. "They are a complete departure from the empty seat. That was rage. This is transcendence." "I was tired of the noise," Elena said. She was cleaning her brushes. Her hands were steady. "MoMA wants them," the agent said, "for a retrospective on art in the age of trauma." "MoMA?" Eleanor paused. "Yes. New York. They want you to come for the opening in the spring." New York. She thought about it. She had always wanted to see New York in the spring. Lucas hated New York. He said it was too dirty, too crowded. "I'll go," Elena said. "Excellent. I'll make the arrangements." The agent looked at her. "There is one more thing, a legal matter." "Yes?" "The police found your ex-husband's car abandoned in downtown Portland. It was impounded." Elena continued to clean her brush. "And Lucas?" "No sign of him. He accessed his bank account one last time, a pawn shop transaction, and then nothing. He has effectively disappeared." The agent hesitated. "Do you want to hire a private investigator to find him?" Elena looked at the white canvas. She looked at the line of gold repair. She thought about Lucas sitting in the mud. She knew he wasn't dead. He was too narcissistic to kill himself. He was out there, somewhere, surviving. She imagined him working in a diner in Idaho, or pumping gas in Nevada, living a small, hard life. Was that enough punishment? She realised she didn't care about punishment anymore. Punishment required a connection. It required her to hold the whip. She wanted to put the whip down. No, Elena said. No? Let him be lost, Elena said. He was always lost. I was just the map he refused to read. She dried her hands on a rag. We are done with the past, Marcus. Let's talk about the New York show. I want the lighting to be very specific, warm, like sunrise. Of course, the agent smiled. Sunrise it is. Elena walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing patches of brilliant, hard blue sky. She saw a bird land on the railing of the terrace. A robin. It chirped, a sharp, cheerful sound. Elena smiled. She turned back to her work. She picked up a tube of paint. Yellow. She squeezed it onto the palette. It was bright. It was the colour of lemons, the colour of taxis, the colour of the sun. She began to mix. Epilogue. 6 months later. A diner in a small coastal town in Northern California. The misty, quiet kind of town. A waitress shouted an order to the back. Order up, 2 burgers, fries well done. In the kitchen, a man stood over the grill. He wore a grease-stained apron and a paper hat. His face was lined, weathered by sun and rough living. He had a beard, grey and unkempt. He flipped the burgers with practised efficiency. Sizzle. Flip. Press. He didn't speak much. The other cooks called him Luke. They knew he lived in a trailer park down the road. They knew he didn't drink. They knew he read discarded newspapers from the trash. Luke plated the burgers. He wiped his hands on a rag. He walked to the service window. On the counter, someone had left a copy of the Art Forum magazine. Luke glanced at it. The cover image was striking. A massive, textured white painting with a single vein of gold. The headline read, Elena Vance, The Luminosity of Survival. Luke froze. He stared at the name. He stared at the painting. It was beautiful. It looked like peace. Luke! Order up! The waitress yelled, snapping her fingers. Luke blinked. He looked at the waitress. Coming, he said. He didn't touch the magazine. He didn't open it to see her face. He didn't deserve to see her face. He pushed the plate of burgers onto the pass. Service, he said. He turned back to the grill. The heat hit his face. The smell of grease filled his nose. He scraped the grill down. The metal hissed. He worked the lunch rush. He worked the dinner rush. He scrubbed the floors at closing time. At midnight, he walked out the back door into the cool night air. He looked up at the stars. He was tired. His back hurt. He had $40 in his pocket. But he was alive. And for the first time in his life, he was earning his keep. He began the long walk home to his trailer, under the vast, indifferent sky, while thousands of miles away, in a gallery in Manhattan, his wife stood in the light, surrounded by applause she could finally hear. The prequel chronicles 20 years ago, the studio apartment in Seattle smelled of turpentine, old coffee, and rain. and it was a smell that Elena would later try to recreate in her mansion, but would never quite capture. The smell of poverty, but also the smell of possibility. Elena was 22. She was wearing oversized overalls covered in paint. She was standing in front of a canvas that was taller than she was. It was a chaotic, vibrant explosion of colour. She called it the noise of the city. There was a knock on the door. Not a hesitant knock, but a confident, rhythmic rap. Tat, tat, tat. She opened it to find a young man standing there. He was soaked to the bone. He wore a cheap suit that he wore like armour. He held a pizza box like a shield. "I heard there was a starving artist in 4B, Lucas said. He flashed a smile. It was the smile. The one that would later close million-dollar deals. The one that would charm Sophie Miller. The one that would hide 1,000 lies. "I'm not starving," Elena said, leaning against the doorframe. "I have paint. Paint is nutritious." "Paint causes lead poisoning," Lucas countered. "Pizza causes happiness. I'm Lucas. I live in 3B. I hear you pacing at night. You pace in a rondo rhythm." "I don't pace," Elena said. "I dance. I paint with my feet." "Well, can you eat with your hands?" He walked in without waiting for an invitation. That was Lucas. He occupied space as if it were his birthright. He set the pizza down on a stack of art books. He looked at the painting. Most people looked at Elena's art and said, "That's nice," or "What is it?" Lucas looked at it and frowned. He tilted his head. "It's angry," he said. Elena froze. "What?" "It's angry," Lucas repeated. "There's red in the corners. It looks like the city is screaming. Is that how you feel? Do you feel like screaming?" Elena looked at him. For the first time, someone had seen past the technique. He had seen the emotion. "Sometimes," she whispered. "Me too," Lucas said. He turned to her. His eyes were intense, hungry. "I want to scream at the world until it listens. I want to build things, Elena. Huge things. I want to put a dent in the universe." "And I want to paint the dent," she said. He laughed. He grabbed a slice of pizza and held it out to her. "We're going to be a team, you and I," he said. "The builder and the painter. I'll make the money, and you'll make the meaning." It sounded like a promise. It sounded like a partnership. Elena took the pizza. She didn't know then that making the meaning would eventually mean hiding the truth. She didn't know that she was signing a contract where she would provide the soul and he would sell it. They sat on the floor and ate. They talked until sunrise. "I promise you," Lucas said, watching the grey dawn light up the Space Needle in the distance. "I promise you, Elle, one day you won't have to live in a place that smells like wet dog. I'm going to buy you a castle." "I don't need a castle," Elena said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I just need good light." "You'll have both," Lucas vowed. He kissed her. It tasted of pepperoni and ambition, and in that moment, the first rivet of the crash was driven into place. Because Lucas didn't fall in love with Elena, he fell in love with her potential to reflect his glory. And Elena didn't fall in love with Lucas. She fell in love with being seen. Chapter 2. The Erosion. 5 years ago. The castle had been bought. The mansion on the hill in Portland. Elena stood in the kitchen. It was white marble, stainless steel, and utterly soulless. She was 37. The paint-stained overalls were gone, replaced by silk blouses and tailored slacks. She was preparing for a dinner party. The board of directors was coming. "Elena!" Lucas shouted from the bedroom upstairs. "Where is my blue tie? The Hermes one." "It's on the chair, Lucas," she called back. Her voice was calm. It was always calm now. She had learned that emotion only irritated him. She went back to arranging the canapes. Smoked salmon on cucumber rounds. Precise. Identical. Boring. She looked at her hands. They were clean. Her nails were manicured. She hadn't painted in 6 months. The last time she tried, Lucas had come into the studio, which was now the guest cottage, and sighed. "Elle, honey, the smell. It clings to your hair. We have the gala tonight. You don't want to smell like chemicals in front of the senator, do you?" So she had stopped. She walked into the living room. On the wall hung a large piece of art. It wasn't hers. It was a generic, inoffensive, abstract piece they had bought from a gallery in New York. Blue squares. Safe. Lucas came down the stairs. He looked magnificent. He was 40. He was the CEO of Vance Tech. He radiated power. "Do I look like a man who just acquired a competitor?" he asked, adjusting his cufflinks. "You look expensive," Elena said. "Good. Expensive is good." He walked over to the table and popped a piece of salmon into his mouth. "Needs more dill." "I'll add more dill," she said, automatically. He looked at her. Really looked at her. "You seem quiet lately," he said. "Are you happy, Elle?" It was a trap. If she said yes, he would ignore her. If she said no, he would buy her something. "I'm content," she said. "Content," he repeated. He didn't like the word. It wasn't enthusiastic enough. "Well, you should be. We have everything." He gestured around the room. The Italian leather sofas, the view of the city, the life he had promised. "Yes," Elena said, "we have everything." "Except us," she thought. The doorbell rang. "Showtime," Lucas said. He put on his smile. It was the same smile he had used in the studio apartment, but now it was practiced. It didn't reach his eyes. Elena opened the door. Standing there was Arthur Pendleton, the chairman, and his wife. And behind them, a young woman. She was 23. She was wearing a dress that was slightly too short for a corporate dinner, and lipstick that was slightly too red. "Elena, Lucas," Arthur boomed. "This is our new intern. Bright girl. Stanford grad. Sophie Miller." Elena looked at the girl. Sophie smiled. It was a nervous, eager smile. She looked at Lucas with a mixture of terror and adoration. "It's an honour to meet you, Mr. Vance," Sophie said. Her voice trembled. Lucas looked at her. Elena saw the spark. It wasn't sexual, not yet. It was narcissistic supply. Lucas saw a mirror. He saw someone who looked at him not as a husband who snored and forgot anniversaries, but as a god. "Welcome to the team, Sophie," Lucas said. His voice dropped an octave. The CEO voice. Elena felt a cold draft. The door was closed, but she felt it anyway. She looked at Sophie's shoes, high heels, uncomfortable, trying too hard. "Come in," Elena said. "I made salmon." That night, Elena watched them. She watched Lucas explain the market to Sophie. She watched Sophie laugh at jokes that weren't funny. She watched the way Lucas's chest puffed out. Elena poured herself another glass of wine. She looked at the blue squares on the wall. She realised then that she was boring. She was the finished painting. Sophie was the blank canvas, and Lucas Vance loved to start new projects. Chapter 3. The Ignition, 6 months ago. The affair didn't start in a hotel room. It started in an elevator. Vance Tech headquarters. 9:00 p.m. Everyone else had gone home. Lucas was working late on the Q3 projections. He was stressed. The numbers were soft. He needed a win. He pressed the button for the parking garage. The doors opened on the 12th floor. Sophie walked in. She was carrying a stack of files. She looked tired. Her hair was messy. "Oh, Mr. Vance," she gasped. "I didn't know you were still here." "Please, Sophie, call me Lucas. It's after hours." Lucas. She tested the name. It sounded like candy in her mouth. The elevator descended. "You're working late," Lucas said. "I wanted to get the press release right," she said, "for the launch. I know how important it is to you." "To the company," he corrected. "To you," she insisted. She looked at him. Her eyes were big, blue, and unblinking. "You are the company, Lucas. Everyone knows that. Without you, this place is just glass and wires." Lucas felt a rush of dopamine. At home, Elena had been asking him about his cholesterol. She had been asking why he missed his mother's birthday. Here, in this metal box, he was Atlas, holding up the world. "It's heavy," Lucas admitted. A moment of calculated vulnerability. Sometimes I feel like I'm holding it up alone." "You're not alone," Sophie said. She took a step closer. The air in the elevator changed. It became charged. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'll help you hold it." The elevator hit the bottom floor. Ding. The doors didn't open. Or maybe they did, and neither of them moved. Lucas looked at her. She was young. She was vibrant. She was the antidote to his midlife stagnation. "You should go home, Sophie," he said. It was a test. "I don't want to go home," she said. "My apartment is empty." "Mine isn't," Lucas said. "My wife is there." "Is she?" Sophie asked. "Is she really there for you? Or is she just in the house?" It was a cruel question, a manipulative question, but it struck the exact weak point in Lucas's armour. He didn't answer. He leaned in. He kissed her. It wasn't like kissing Elena. Elena's kisses were familiar, comfortable, deep. Sophie's kiss was frantic, desperate, tasting of mints and adrenaline. It was the taste of risk. When they pulled apart, Lucas knew he was in trouble, but he also knew he felt alive. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "The Ritz," he said. "I have a corporate suite." That night, he transferred $3,500 from the joint account to pay for the incidental expenses of the suite. He labelled it Client Entertainment. He didn't sleep that night. He lay awake watching Sophie sleep, feeling like a king and feeling like a thief. He convinced himself it was temporary, a stress reliever, a drug. He didn't know it. He had just lit the fuse that would blow up his car, his marriage, and his life. Chapter 4. The Premonition. 1 week before the crash. The rain in Portland had been falling for 7 days straight. Elena was in the study. She had found the receipt. It wasn't the Cartier receipt yet. It was a receipt for a dinner at Le Pigeon. 2 covers, 400. Tuesday night. On Tuesday night, Lucas had told her he was at a board meeting. They ordered pizza at board meetings. They did not eat foie gras at Le Pigeon. Elena sat with the piece of paper. She didn't cry. She felt a strange sensation, a clicking into place. The late nights, the new cologne, the way he guarded his phone like a nuclear football. She knew. She didn't confront him. Not yet. She was a planner. She was an artist who understood composition. You don't reveal the focal point until the background is ready. She started looking. She checked the bank accounts. She checked the phone logs. She found Sophie. It wasn't hard. Her name was all over the calendar invites. Strategy meeting, S. Miller. PR review, S. Miller. Elena looked up Sophie Miller on Instagram. She saw the photos. Sophie at the winery. Sophie at the beach. And in the reflection of Sophie's sunglasses in one photo, she saw a man in a blue Hermes tie. Elena put her phone down. She walked to the window. She looked out at the rain. She should leave him. That was what strong women did in movies. They packed a bag, threw a drink in his face, and walked out. But Elena was tired, and she was invested. 20 years. Her youth, her art, her womb, which had remained empty because Lucas wasn't ready for children, though now she suspected he just wasn't ready with her. She decided to give him one last chance. The anniversary trip, the coast. She would suggest it. If he agreed, if he tried, if he showed 1 ounce of genuine connection, maybe she would forgive him. Maybe she would fight for them. But if he lied... She heard the garage door open. Lucas was home. She smoothed her face into a mask of calm. She walked out to meet him. "Lucas," she said, "I was thinking, for our anniversary next week, let's go to the coast. Just us. No phones, no work." Lucas looked at her. He looked panic-stricken for a microsecond. Then he smiled. "That sounds wonderful, Elle. A reset. Exactly what we need." He kissed her cheek. Then he turned away and pulled out his phone. "I just need to send 1 email," he said. Elena watched him type. She saw his thumbs moving fast. She knew who he was texting. He is inviting her, Elena thought. He is bringing his sin with him. She felt the final crack in her heart. It wasn't a loud break. It was a silent crash. "Okay," Elena whispered to the empty room as Lucas walked away. "Let's go to the coast." She went upstairs and packed her bag. She packed her sketchbook, and she packed the red notebook where she had started writing down the forensic timeline of his betrayal. She wasn't going on a vacation. She was going on an execution. Chapter 5. The view from the dashboard, the physics of the crash. There is a science to a car crash. Velocity, 65 miles per hour. Mass, 5,000 pounds. The SUV. Friction coefficient, 0.4. Wet asphalt. When Lucas slammed on the brakes, the physics took over. The anti-lock braking system, ABS, pulsed the brakes 15 times per second. Thud, 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 thud. But physics does not care about technology when the vector of momentum exceeds the grip of the tyres. The car hydroplaned. For 1.5 seconds, the vehicle was a boat. It floated on a layer of water. In that 1.5 seconds, 3 brains processed reality differently. Lucas's brain, amygdala activation. Pure terror. I'm going to die. My car. My reputation. His hands gripped the wheel not to steer, but to brace. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't look at his mistress. He looked at the tree rushing toward him. Ego death. Sophie's brain, visual cortex overload. The red lights of the truck. Flight response. She screamed, a biological siren designed to alert the tribe to danger. She reached out, not for the handle, but for Lucas. Dependency. Elena's brain, prefrontal cortex engagement. She saw the trajectory. She calculated the angle. We are going over. She didn't scream. She didn't reach for Lucas. She relaxed her muscles. It is a known medical fact that drunk people and sleeping people often survive crashes better than tense people because they don't brace against the impact. They flow with the violence. Elena flowed. Resignation. The impact. The car hit the gravel. It flipped. Centrifugal force threw them against their restraints. Glass shattered. Tempered safety glass, designed to break into cubes, not shards, but at high velocity, cubes are still bullets. The roof collapsed. The car came to rest. And then the second phase of physics began. The physics of sound, the rain, the hiss of the radiator, the scream of Sophie Miller, and the silence of Elena Vance. It was this silence that sealed her fate. Lucas, governed by the reptilian brain of survival, gravitated toward the noise. The noise, Sophie, signalled life. The silence, Elena, signalled death or danger. He moved toward the noise. It was a biological error. It was a moral failure. It was the end of his life, disguised as an act of rescue.